Despite what he'd said to her, he wasn't sure how much standing he would have when it came to custody of his daughter. Ronnie could tell the courts he was a danger to her, and given his history, it was a believable argument. That was, if he could ever show his face in a court. It was all fucked up, and he had to find a way to make things right between them again. The door came open, and Ezra strode out. "You need to come inside. We have a situation," he said grimly. "Tucker, we need your medical skills." He rushed in, terrified it might be too late to fix anything. Ronnie watched as Robert walked outside, 2 beers in his hand. She felt ridiculous skulking around like she was the spy. She wasn't. She was the woman who was trying to avoid another fight. Or maybe she wanted to avoid the fact that they might not fight at all, that Tucker might have written her off after last night's debacle. This was how she'd spent her day, hiding out, thinking way too much, putting off that moment when she would have to talk to him again. Tucker was already out there. She'd seen him, staring out at the yard like there were answers there. She had a few answers, just not the ones either of them wanted to hear. Arthur had sent her the PI's file on Tucker's last few days in Munich. There were pictures that clearly showed Tucker walking into Katie's apartment in Munich. He'd stayed for an hour and a half, and then gone home. 2 days later, they'd been in Paris, and it had all gone to hell. Seeing those pictures of her sister with Tucker had made her heart seize. Katie. She'd been dressed casually, and she'd given him her friend's smile. Ronnie had always been able to tell a lot about how her sister felt from her expression. In the picture the PI had caught, her sister had a smile that lit her eyes up. She'd liked Tucker. She'd been happy to see him. What the hell did she do with that? Her stomach rumbled, and she made her way to the kitchen since it appeared the brothers would be out there for a while. It was good that they were talking. It really was. She was happy he'd found his brother and knew exactly who Robert was to him. But God, it made her miss her sister. She had to get it together, because Ezra Fane had promised her a call to her mother and daughter in an hour, and she would have to sit beside Tucker and act like nothing was wrong. She couldn't bring her mom into this until she was sure of what she wanted to do. Sandra Croft could be a steamroller, obliterating everything in her path when she wanted to. She didn't want Tucker to get caught in that. If her mom even got a hint that Tucker had a hand in what had happened to Katie, she wouldn't ever listen to reason. She needed to figure out how to handle this before she ever breathed a word of the situation to her mom. It left her feeling incredibly alone. All through the last few years, her mom had been at her side. She'd helped her make the decisions when it came to Violet. She might have felt alone, but she hadn't been. "Hey, stranger." Nina stood in the kitchen wearing pajama pants and a t-shirt, her hair up in a high ponytail. She stood by the range, a tray of teacups by her side, as she waited for the water to boil. She wasn't alone. Arthur was there, placing some half sandwiches on the tray. He was still dressed for work. Despite the fact that they weren't in an office, Arthur dressed like he was. He'd shown up for breakfast wearing a jacket and tie and hadn't taken either off, though it was almost bedtime. Not that she would sleep. He glanced her way. "Veronica, we missed you today. Not that you missed much. We made absolutely no progress." Nina looked up from her task. "That's not what I heard. I was told he managed to remember something about you." Arthur went stiff. "Well, we did work together. He claims he can remember the day we met, but that isn't meaningful at all. It was the only thing we could get out of him today. Levi Green tried to pull some important information out of him, but to no avail. Your boyfriend seems to be having trouble focusing." Maybe she wasn't hungry. Tucker had walked away the night before, but she'd heard the anguish in his voice. She'd known how upset he'd been. Unlike Stephen Reeser, Tucker wasn't good at hiding his emotions. Or perhaps he didn't have to anymore. Perhaps he'd had to do it for so long He simply couldn't when the reason for tamping it all down had been erased from his mind.
I'm sorry to hear that.
She'd hoped there would be a breakthrough that led them back to the garden, or that would allow her to go to New York to be with her mom and Violet. She wasn't sure how long she could hold out when they had to stay in the same house. She needed time to think and consider all the ramifications of Arthur's information. Instead, all she'd been able to think about was how much she'd missed Tucker. In the course of a few days, he'd become necessary to her again. Maybe more necessary than the first time around, since now she knew how good he was as a father. Who was she fooling? The feeling in her heart wasn't about his skills as a dad. She liked him. Even more this time around. He was kind and thoughtful. He made her laugh. She felt more like herself when he was with her.
Don't listen to him. Ariel isn't worried. It's a process,
Nina assured her.
This could take time. Can I get you something, love? You missed your dinner. I'm making a spot of tea. Arthur and the intelligence lads are having a meeting to discuss their reports. I offered to make them some tea because I could use a bit before bed. There's some roast left if you're hungry. Tea sounds nice.
She couldn't eat a bunch, but she'd seen some fruit, and Nina had made cookies earlier. That would do, and then maybe after they'd talked to Violet, she and Tucker could talk about how to proceed. They couldn't spend their days avoiding each other.
I brought along some excellent Schwarz tea,
Arthur explained.
Like we used to have in the break room?
It was one of the only things she'd missed from Kronberg. They had tea in the break room in the afternoons, and she'd learned to love the rich black tea they served there. The English were known as the world's tea drinkers, but the Germans weren't far behind. Arthur smiled.
Exactly. I know I should switch to something that will help me sleep, but it's going to be a long night. I have a call back to Munich, and they won't like what I have to say. I promise, I'll let them know how important it is to not give Tucker more drugs.
No matter what went on between them, she wouldn't change her mind about that.
We don't understand how the first drugs affected him, or what was in them. I still don't believe Levi Green doesn't have the formulary, Nina admitted. I find it hard to believe there was a random dose of cure lying around.
That was a good point.
That does seem odd. From what I've been told, Green stole a lot of intelligence from the group. He did in Colorado, at least. I think stealing is a difficult word, since McKay Taggart broke into that facility, Arthur pointed out. It was a CIA base. At least Green was actually working for the CIA at the time. He had some right to be there. I can't say the same for what they did at Kronberg. That was theft, pure and simple. Neither the CIA nor a group of rogue citizens had the right to come into a private company and steal documents. I would like to point out that you're all lucky my company is being patient. If Kronberg doesn't want to be investigated, maybe they should vet their research more carefully, Nina said as the kettle began to whistle. And perhaps they should stay away from Illuminati-like groups who try to influence politics in a way that corporations shouldn't. If the CIA truly believed my company was a part of... what was it called? Arthur asked. Oh, she knew this one. It was exactly what her sister had been investigating. The Collective. Arthur's eyes rolled behind his glasses. Yes, the Collective. It's ridiculous to think a group of corporations who are normally at war with one another could ever cooperate long enough to take over the world. What had Katie told her? They don't need to take over the world. Just push it this way or that. Just enough to keep them in economic power. All they need is a few of the right people in the right places to make things happen for them. The words played through her head as Nina and Arthur argued. Nina poured hot water into 2 separate pots. We'll have to agree to disagree, Arthur said. I find arguing with conspiracy theorists to be wearing. Facts don't matter to people like you. Veronica, I bid you good night. Perhaps you'll join us in the morning. It seems Stephen needs something other than the good of the world in order to actually focus on the job at hand. Maybe you can be that for him." He picked up his tray of late-night treats and walked back toward where the English and German operatives would be waiting for him. "There's an unctuous prick if I ever saw one," Nina said with a sigh. "Sometimes those big words come in handy." She placed some cookies on her tray and picked it up. "Let's sit and have a chat. Arthur might be an arrogant knob, but he's right about one thing. Tucker was off today. I suspect you had something to do with that. What's he done?" Nina was so nice it could be easy to forget she was a trained investigator. She'd spent years with Interpol running down some of the world's worst criminals. If she was still there, she would likely be looking for Tucker. Was she treating Tucker like a criminal? Had she lost faith because her grief had stricken out like a viper she'd thought was gone? "We had a fight," she admitted. It might be good to talk to someone. If she couldn't talk to her mom, it might as well be Nina. She didn't seem particularly close to Tucker. From what Ronnie understood, Nina had only been with the team for a few months. The only other person she might be able to talk to would be Solo, but she was oddly intimidating. There was a core to Solo that seemed a bit untouchable, despite how warm the woman could be. Ariel was Tucker's sister-in-law, so she was a no-go. She didn't think Ezra Fane would appreciate being made a relationship sounding board. Nina it was, then. "I assumed so, since you both looked utterly miserable," Nina said, pulling out a chair. "He didn't sleep in your room last night." "How did you know? I thought he snuck into another room." He hadn't seemed to want anyone to know they were having trouble. He'd smiled her way when he'd come down for breakfast, and she'd noticed he'd come in from the direction he would have had he slept in their room, rather than the easiest route from the room he'd stayed in. "It's my responsibility to know everything that goes on in the house. Ezra is too preoccupied with Solo and vice versa. Robert can't think about anything but his brother and Ariel. I'm the only one who can think straight here, so I have to be careful." She stood up and walked to the doorway, glancing the way Arthur had gone before returning to the table and picking the tray up again. She walked right back to the sink. "Ah, is something wrong with the tea?" She'd been looking forward to it. "Yes, it comes from Arthur, who happens to travel with his own tea." Nina poured the pot out. "Like I said, I have to be careful. And I would be an idiot if I let you drink something that man gave us. Right now, we don't eat or drink anything we're not 100% sure is fine. There are 2 spies in this house I don't trust, and Arthur Dwyer works for an evil pharmaceutical corporation." Put like that, it did seem ridiculous. She wasn't built for the conspiracy life. She wanted what he'd promised her that day in Paris. A quiet practice where they cared for their patients, a life where they raised their children. She wanted more kids, and she wanted them with Tucker. But how could they go on? Nina dumped the tea but came back with something better. "I can assure you he hasn't put anything in this." She held up the bottle of wine before opening it and filling 2 glasses. "You think he tried to poison us?" The idea sent a shiver down her spine. Were they not safe here? Were they safe anywhere? She hadn't felt safe for years, but now she realized she'd reached next-level anxiety. Nina shrugged and passed her a glass of the rich red wine. "I'm not taking the chance, but I'm also not going to accuse him of anything. I found it's best to smile and let whoever your opponent is completely underestimate you. What did Tucker do?" Arthur was the opponent. Why had she forgotten that? It didn't mean he was lying, but it did mean he didn't have pure motives for showing her that report. "He knew my sister. The one who was killed. From what I've read about her, she was possibly investigating the collective." Ronnie took a sip. "She was. At the time, I thought she was crazy." "She definitely wasn't, though I can understand how it would look that way," Nina admitted. let me see if I can guess how this plays out for you. So either Arthur or Rupert showed you something that links Tucker with your sister, hoping that he didn't say anything back then when he was pretending to be Stephen Reeser. If Tucker never mentioned to you that he knew your sister, naturally your brain will put two and two together. If Stephen knew your sister and didn't tell you, he might have had a hand in her death. At the very least, Levi might have. Since Levi is connected to Stephen, you have to consider that he might have had something to do with it, even though she died after Stephen had already become Tucker.
Well, that succinctly summed her up.
Why wouldn't he have told me he knew Katie?
Nina chuckled, likely at how naive she sounded.
Well, in the first place, he was working for the agency. They tend to be tight-lipped. He didn't tell you his real name. There's a possibility that he didn't know she was your sister.
No, he knew, Ronnie explained.
I showed him pictures of her and he never said a thing.
Nina nodded.
All right. Then it might have been important you not know anything. I can't be sure. I might not be the best person to give you advice about this. Because you like Tucker? No, because I've been used for information before. It's why I left Interpol,
Nina admitted.
I was seeing a man there, another agent. I was on the biggest case of my career, investigating an international arms dealer. Unfortunately, he was working the case too. From the arms dealer's side. He slept with me to get information for his real boss. Is that what you think Tucker did? Slept with you to get information about your sister? He never asked about her.
He'd listened to her talk about Katie, but he certainly hadn't pressed her for anything beyond asking about stories from her childhood. Now that she thought about it, she wasn't sure hearing about the great soap debate of their teens would have done anything to help his cause.
Not anything serious. Like he didn't ask about her work, obviously because he knew what she did.
Nina nodded, as though she'd expected that was the case.
Then you've got two options for why he did what he did. Option A. He formed a relationship with you in hopes of eventually using you against your sister. I would assume they would have threatened you to get her to hand over her research or something like that.
That was definitely a scenario that had gone through her head.
And the other option? He fell in love with you,
Nina said simply.
He was in a position where he could have gotten you killed. He thought the less you knew, the better. I know that sounds harsh, and every person who's ever been on the other side of this argument thinks they had a right to know what was going on. But they're wrong.
Ronnie didn't understand why. Knowledge was always better than ignorance.
At least I would have known what was coming for me. What was coming for you, Ronnie? MacDonald? According to what you told Solo, she did come for you, and as your mind is still completely your own, she must have decided you didn't know anything,
Nina pointed out.
Otherwise, you would either have found yourself without a memory, or more likely, without a life. According to your report, she showed up at that Paris flat you were staying at the same day Tucker went missing. Yes.
She could remember how carefully MacDonald had studied her, questioning her and finding her utterly harmless.
She came by to pick up Tucker's computer and his tablet.
Her stomach clenched as she realized who else had shown up. She'd known, but she hadn't realized the cruelty of it. It made tears threaten.
She brought Robert with her. Robert was there. He took Tucker's computer and his things. Do you think...
Nina took a long sip of wine.
Do I think that she brought Robert with her to taunt Tucker? To show him exactly how close he came to saving his brother, right before she took it all away from him? Perhaps. I also think that if you'd shown even a hint that you knew what was going on, she might have taken you to Argentina and let her boys have fun with you. She liked to let them sleep with women as rewards for good behavior, and then they would wake up next to a corpse in the morning. You could have been that for Tucker, had she not believed you.
A fine tremble went through her.
Tucker had known how cruel MacDonald could be. It was why he'd done what he'd done to Rebecca. If he'd told Rebecca, she would have confronted MacDonald. It was her nature. So he'd done something bad to stop something far worse from happening. He'd taken the sin on himself. She wasn't a great actress. She didn't lie well. If he'd told her what was happening, she likely would have given herself away that day when she was in the same room with MacDonald. She would have come off as scared and anxious instead of sad that her boyfriend had used her. He really was protecting me. He promised he would tell me everything when he was done. I think he was planning on us leaving from Paris. Yes, I believe he was. Nina sighed, sitting back. Believe me when I say I know how a man who's using a woman acts. He doesn't keep her safe. He puts her up as a shield to save himself. I don't know what Tucker was doing with your sister, but I don't think that man is capable of what you're accusing him of. Have you considered the fact that he might have been working with your sister, and they were both trying to protect you? That you had two people who wanted so badly to look out for you? What did Katie say when you told her Tucker had left? The tears flowed freely now, because in this she was absolutely the guilty party. I never told her. She knew I was seeing him, but I avoided her after he left me. I dodged her calls, and then she died. Would her sister have known something had gone wrong and saved herself if she'd talked to her about what happened to Tucker? Nina shook her head. No, you can't go there. You can't. MacDonald took her out. Or maybe Kronberg did, for all we know. They would have found you, and then you and Katie would be dead. Violet wouldn't have been born. Can't you see that was exactly what they were both trying to stop? She'd been wrong. She didn't have a lick of proof, but the scenario Nina had put out was the correct one. He hadn't betrayed her. He hadn't used her. He'd done everything he could in the best way he'd known how. She'd betrayed him. She stood up. I have to go talk to him. Nina smiled. I'm glad. I honestly believe if he knows you're with... Nina's words were cut off with the sound of a single ping. It was so quiet. Nothing more than a brief puff of air whispering around her as the bullet entered Nina's chest. Bright red blood bloomed. Up and left of her heart, but it might have gotten her lung. She needed to seal the wound. It wouldn't be fatal if she could seal it and keep Nina breathing. Well, you obviously didn't drink the tea as I had planned. She was a bit too smart for her own good, Arthur said, staring down at Nina as she fell to the floor. He glanced back Ronnie's way. If you scream, I'll put one in her brain. I'm not good with the shooting business. I'm not a damn spy. I missed her heart. She might still live, but only if you come with me. Come now, Veronica. You're not so out of practice. You don't know that what I'm saying is true, are you? He was so close. He wouldn't miss this time. He couldn't. Nina wouldn't survive. You should hurry, or I'll shoot anyone who walks in here. Don't think I won't. I already drugged the head of MI6 and a German intelligence agent. I have nothing to lose. You have 10 seconds to make your decision, he said, his eyes lit with something that scared the hell out of her. Truth. He was telling her the utter truth. I'll come with you. She didn't have another choice. There was no way she could stand here and watch him kill Nina. He wouldn't stop there. If she screamed, he would kill her, too. Arthur grimaced as he approached her. I think you'll likely comply until we're far enough away that I won't be able to hurt your friend. I told them I didn't want this job. She barely managed to gasp before he brought the gun down on her head, and the whole world went dark. Chapter 14. She's stable. You got to her in time and managed to keep her breathing, Ariel said over the phone 2 hours later. "The doctors here say she was lucky."
"What about the intelligence officers?" Tucker asked. He'd had a lot to deal with, and he was only now starting to completely understand how fucked they all were.
"They're both still sedated," Ariel replied. "But the toxicology came back, and the doctors assure me they're going to be fine. No word on Veronica."
His stomach rolled, and Ezra nodded, holding his hand out to take the phone. "We're working on it. I've already sent copies of the security tapes to Dallas. They'll go over it with a fine-tooth comb for anything that might help," Ezra was saying. "We couldn't chase after that massive ass because we had to deal with Nina and then our sleeping friends. I suspect Arthur planned to drug Nina as well, but she chose wine over tea." He'd seen Arthur carrying an unconscious Veronica into the woods. It had been right there on the security cameras. They would have been minutes behind, but he hadn't been able to chase after them because he'd had a dying Nina, and he was the only one with medical expertise. Now it was too late, and she was gone. She was gone. They were supposed to be talking about how good Violet looked, and awkwardly trying to broach the subject of what had gone wrong between them, but he didn't even know where she was. Had she been drugged too? What did Arthur Dwyer want? If he'd thought to kidnap Veronica Croft, there was only one thing Dwyer could want. Him. "I found where he had a car hidden in the woods." Robert strode in, Solo hard on his heels. "We followed the tracks to the road and lost him there."
"I've already talked to Damon, and he's got someone working on the traffic cams," Solo explained.
He could already see a problem with that scenario. "You don't know what kind of car he's driving?"
"No, but we can make some educated guesses."
Solo had her phone out again.
"We can check and see if a new car shows up between cameras. It's not foolproof, but we have to give it a shot. I'm also trying to figure out if anyone is scheduled to fly out of one of the private airfields. There aren't many around here. We're fairly isolated, so we have a shot."
They wouldn't find Arthur. He would be well-funded, and he would have a plan. Who will he call with the ransom request? Ezra hung up with Ariel. "I suspect it will be Damon, or maybe me. I don't know, man. You know what he'll want, right?"
"We don't know anything yet," Solo argued.
He hadn't thought she could be naive. "At some point he'll call, and he'll be willing to make an exchange. Me for Ronnie. Once he has me, I'll be taken to some lab Kronberg owns, and he'll give me all those drugs he's wanted to from the beginning. They'll do whatever they can to find that intel." "And keep us out of the loop," Robert surmised. His brother was thinking along the same lines. "I'm certain they'll say something about how Arthur was acting as a rogue agent, and they have no idea what's going on."
"Then why would Arthur do it?" Solo asked.
There was only one real reason he could think of. His name is on the list. Or he knows whose is, and he thinks getting that list will give him all the power he needs. The question is, what will he do with Ronnie? I can't see him actually giving her up. "Which is why this is an irrational plan," Robert said. "He has to know there's zero way we give you up. Not when he'll kill Ronnie anyway. You have to know that. He can't let her live." Nausea threatened to overtake him. He can't think he'll get away with this if she dies. I won't stop, and Big Tag won't let him get away with killing me.
"It's got to be bad,"
Solo said with a shake of her head.
"Whatever is in the intel you stole. It has to be damning if he's risking this much."
Her cell buzzed and she grimaced.
"It's DC. I have to take this. Ezra, will you please check on Levi? He was fine when I left, but it's been a while."
She stepped out of the room, and after a few seconds, he heard the back door open and close. "You have to give me up," he said. He couldn't see a way around it. "You have to be careful and make sure you get Ronnie out of there. I'll make it a condition of turning myself over."
He couldn't leave Violet without her mom. He couldn't let her die out there for him. He would do anything it took to make sure she got out of this alive and whole, and then his brothers would take care of her. All of his brothers. The blood one and the ones he'd chosen. How funny was it that when they'd been separated, they'd found their brotherhood again without ever knowing there was an ounce of blood between them. He trusted Robert would see to Veronica and Violet's health and happiness. He could do what needed to be done because his brothers would make sure the people he loved were okay. Ezra glanced outside, his eyes on his ex-wife as she paced. Or we could negotiate. How? Robert asked. We do something truly shitty to Solo because she would never go for this plan. He frowned. I know I talk crap about her all the time, but I don't want to do this to her. I can't think of another way out. I'm worried she's telling her boss what happened, and they'll come pick up Levi in the morning, and our shot will be gone. She won't have a choice. Come with me. Ezra turned and started down the hallway. It was the one that led to Levi Green's cell. But then didn't all the roads of his life lead back to that asshole? He followed along. How far away was Veronica now? Had they gotten her on a plane? Was she already en route to Germany? Would he ever see her again? This is going to be all right, Robert was saying as he walked down the hall. I'm going to make sure of it. I've already contacted Owen. He knows what's happening and he's monitoring things back in London. I think Damon's giving MI6 some serious hell. And that will work in our favor, Ezra added, taking the steps down to the dungeon. But I don't think it will work fast enough. We've got to move before dawn if we're going to do this. Tucker had a good idea of what Ezra was saying. It was dangerous, and he wasn't sure they could pull it off. You think Green will go along with it? Ezra slid his key into the door and unlocked it. He'd been down here when all the chaos had started, and Tucker was happy he'd been watching over Green or they might have lost him, too. He and Robert had heard nothing, seen nothing, until Ezra had come running. What the hell is happening? Green was on his feet, his hands wrapped around the bars. You think I can't hear down here? I might not be able to make out what you're saying, but I know when something's gone to hell. Don't you forget you need me. You let some fucking foreign agency take me and you get nothing. Where's Solo? There was a wild look in his eyes that almost convinced Tucker he cared about the outcome. He supposed obsession was a kind of caring. She's safe upstairs. Ronnie's the one who's gone, and Nina has a bullet in her chest because she preferred wine to tea. Green cursed under his breath before slamming his palm against the bars. I knew this would happen. Was it MI6, or did that fucker Dwyer show his colors? Rupert is sleeping off a roofie, Robert explained. Green shook his head. Kronberg is touchy. You know what they want, right? Me. But maybe he could find something they wanted even more. Green looked to Ezra. What's Solo doing? She's out talking to D.C., Ezra replied, his eyes stony. I'm sure they'll have your transport logistics figured out in no time at all. Unless we can come to an agreement. Green was back at the bars, a fierce look in his eyes. You know we can. You know exactly what we need to do. Solo won't go for it. She'll play it safe because she won't want to get you in trouble. Everything she's doing right now is to put you in a position to get your job back. She'll sacrifice this whole operation to do it, but you don't want that, do you? Robert seemed to grasp what Ezra was offering them. You want to break Green out before Solo's boss can come? Tucker stared at the man who'd recruited him and left him behind when the tide had turned. He didn't want to have to depend on Levi Green, but it looked like he didn't have a choice. We need to go to Paris. Green was right that first day. I need to be in the city. I need to stand where it all started and let myself trust my instincts. You remember what it was like when I got inside the Kronberg building a few weeks ago? He'd known where to go, known where the safe would be hidden. It had been as though his feet could remember what his head couldn't. It might be the same in Paris. His body might recall the terrible things that happened that day, but he would need Green to set him on the path. There might be a way around it, though. You can give me everything you know about where I was in Paris. Ronnie didn't know the address, but she gave me some landmarks. I think you know exactly where I was. Tell me, he said. I'll take it from there. After all, he hadn't needed anyone with him in the Kronberg building. He'd made that happen. Maybe he could mitigate the risk. Green shook his head. No, I'm going with you. Ezra's eyes narrowed. Or I could beat it out of you. You think I can't take a beating? How long do you have? A few minutes before Solo shows up again and you have to get physical with her? You won't like that. She will fight you on this. You ready for it? Because I survived weeks with some of the best torturers imaginable, and guess what? I didn't break. I won't break because I've waited too long for this. I'd rather die than stop now. How about you, Timmy? You got your brother back, so it's okay for the girl to die? I swear to God, I'll kill you if you stab me in the back, Tucker swore. Ezra's head fell forward with a groan. She's going to kill me, but I don't see another way out. Call Owen. Leave Damon out of it. He needs plausible deniability. But tell Owen to get his ass to Paris. You'll need support. I'll get to France if I can. But he might not be able to because Solo might take him into custody for what they were about to do. They were fucking her over, and hard. She might lose her job over it. And he would do it to save Ronnie. He would do anything to save her. But Ezra was missing one important point. How will they contact us? He didn't leave a note. Rob and I dumped ourselves. Won't he have to contact Damon? Ezra reached into his pocket and came up with a cell phone. It was the cheap kind that wasn't registered. I found it by Nina's body. I slipped it in my pocket, or Solo would have insisted on keeping it. You knew exactly what you were going to do the minute you realized someone had taken Veronica Croft, Green said in a silky tone. You might have been out of the game for a while, but you haven't forgotten how to play. Now go and do what you need to do. I'll take care of this. I promise on my honor, I'll do everything I can to help Tucker find that intelligence and bring it back to you. You don't have any honor, Ezra said, but I do, and I mean what I say, Green shot back. I won't even try to get away, and you know why? Because you're about to distract her, and she won't ever forgive you for that. She'll understand exactly what you did, and it will break her in a way you haven't yet. That's where I'll slip in. I'll come back and give her what she needs, and I'll be the hero. Ezra's hands fisted. Somehow I doubt that. Not that she'll be angry with me, but that she'll turn to you. But that's exactly what she does when she's upset with you, Green crooned. Do you want him to murder you, asshole? He needed to shut this down. Green's eyes slid to the floor. No. I'm sorry. I can't help it around him. I meant what I said. I will help you, Tucker. I owe you. I was the reason you were in Paris. Let's finish this up, once and for all. Tucker nodded. He couldn't find it in him to speak. He knew he was making a deal with the devil, but he was out of options. Ariel's going to kill me, Robert said with a sigh. I'll make the calls. There's a Land Rover in the garage, and I know where the keys are. We have to move before my wife gets back. She won't like this. I'll go alone. I don't want to come between you and your wife, he said.
I said she wouldn't like it, not that she won't understand. I'll ask forgiveness, not permission, Robert said resolutely. And I'll handle Solo. Ezra moved to the stairs again, a grim look on his face. Contact me on the secure line when you can. I'll be back in London by morning. If I'm not on my way to D.C. Because Solo would have every reason to turn him in for betraying her. If there was any other way. There isn't, and we have very little time. Keep that phone on you at all times, Ezra ordered. It's how Arthur Dwyer will contact you. I'll work on getting Jax out in case we need to go to ground. In case they failed. If he failed, he took a lot of good people with him. I'll meet you out back in 10, Robert promised. Ezra handed him the keys to Levi's prison. Good luck. He was alone with the devil. He was going to need it. Ronnie's head throbbed, but she kept as quiet as she could, because no blow to the head could possibly make her forget the nightmare she found herself in. Misery swamped her, but she forced herself to focus. What had her mother taught her? Assess the situation. She was moving. She could feel the motion of a car, but she was in complete darkness. Her hands were tied, but she could move her feet. There was a faint hint of gasoline and the muffled sound of a man speaking. Trunk. She was in the trunk of a car, likely whatever Arthur had waiting for him. How long had she been out? Were they still in England? Or had he made the crossing into France, from where he would have the ease to go almost anywhere in Europe, a road connected to? Did Tucker know she was gone? Did he care? Or had she killed whatever he'd felt for her with her doubt? It was funny that now she didn't have a single doubt in her mind. She knew Nina was right. Tucker and her sister had been trying to protect her as best they could. They'd been the ones who had paid, and they'd managed to spare her. She couldn't be angry. When she thought about it, she likely would have done the same thing. But none of that mattered now, because she was being driven away from him. Fast. She'd assessed her situation. Fucked. That was the only way to describe it. Now it was time to figure out what her assets were. Was there anything she could use to help get herself out of the situation? Suddenly having a locator in her butt actually did seem like a plus. If this was Tucker being stolen away, she could find him. It sounded insane that first day when he'd told her it was one of the things he brought to the table, but now she got it. He'd been in this position more than once, and having a GPS locator inserted into his body was a must. She breathed in, trying to find a calm place. Panic wouldn't serve her in any way. She needed a cool head. They wouldn't kill her right away. They would try to get Tucker to turn himself over, or turn over the intelligence she was absolutely sure he didn't have. Did they think he was lying? How old was the vehicle she was in? Newer vehicles had trunk releases in case someone got caught. If she could locate it, she might risk rolling herself out of the car when it slowed down. It was so dark she couldn't tell what direction she was facing. She reached out, trying to get a sense of how big the trunk was. She was facing inward. As gently as she could, she turned her body, head aching with every move. Arthur was speaking in German. She didn't hear a response. He was likely on the phone. She listened for a moment, but it was hard to hear over the hum of the engine and the drone of tires beating against the road. He was saying something about how he had to do it. The situation was getting out of hand. It wouldn't work without the drugs, and... She lost part of the conversation. Arthur mentioned her, and how she was the key to getting Reeser to play ball. Playing ball meant submitting to the drugs they wanted him to take. They wanted to be in control of his memories. He said something about what would happen if Tucker remembered and named names. They wouldn't have anywhere to hide. They needed control. She reached out, trying to feel for the release latch. Tucker would trade himself.
There was no question in her mind he would do it. Even if he was angry with her, he would be there, trying to ensure her safety. He would do it for his daughter. Hell, he would do it for the woman who'd accused him of being a bad guy. He would do it because he was a good guy. The car started to slow, and Arthur said something about being close. Close to what? Were they near whatever place he intended to keep her in? Or was he turning her over to even worse people? They wouldn't let her live, any more than they would let Tucker live after he gave them what they wanted. Her heart was beating in her chest, so hard she worried he would be able to hear it. The car was rolling to a stop. She worked, feeling for anything that might help her. She would run. It didn't matter that her hands were tied. She would run and hide and find a way to survive. It was all that mattered. Getting back to Tucker and Vi was all that mattered. The car rolled to a stop, and she still hadn't found the lever. It was hard to maneuver her body. She twisted, but couldn't get her hands where she needed them to be. Frustration welled, threatening to merge with the panic she hadn't quite banished. It made a big comeback as she heard the door come open and close. One shot. She would have one shot at this. Her legs were the only weapons she had. She would have to kick out and get to the ground, run as fast as she could without even knowing where she was going. She had to take the chance. There was nothing else to do except fight. Tucker needed her. She had to force herself to breathe as the trunk started to come open. She tried to kick her legs out, but strong arms caught her, and she felt the pain of a needle penetrating her leg, and the world immediately went fuzzy. "Sorry, Veronica," Arthur said. "I can't allow you to leave. My name is on that list." As she started to go under, she knew she'd been right. They would never let any of them live. Chapter 15. Tucker looked up and down the street, praying he recognized anything at all. Nothing. It was a lovely morning in Paris, and the people were already out in masse, walking into the gardens that ran the length from the Place de la Concorde to the Louvre. Tourists with cameras mingled with locals carrying their coffees and walking their dogs. He wanted to walk through the park with Veronica. They might not be able to come back to Europe for a long time. Of course, if they did take a nice traipse through the park, it might be the last thing they did. How did he explain to his newly committed girlfriend that he'd just made a drop to a CIA agent, and they had to run because all of their old colleagues would want to kill him now? And hey, how about a June wedding? Wyoming was nice that time of year. Tucker stopped, the feeling so clear in his head that it could have happened yesterday. He'd stood in front of the gardens and known that it was almost over. "Don't," a familiar voice said. "He's got the scent of something." "It would be easier if you would point out the damn apartment building," Robert groused. "And then he wouldn't have these lovely moments where he looks like a zombie," Green shot back. Levi Green was an asshole, but he hadn't tried anything. Yet. He shook his head, letting the feeling go because he was on a clock and he couldn't afford to get sick. He had less than 4 hours to turn himself over to Arthur Dwyer, or they would start sending him Veronica's body parts. They'd already sent him a video of her. She'd been tied up and unconscious, only the faint rise and fall of her chest reassuring him that she was alive. Would she still be alive at this time tomorrow? Would he? "Hey, you okay?" His brother had been with him the whole way. Robert had driven hours during the long night it had taken to get them to Paris. Much of that time had been spent with Big Tag screaming at them over a cell phone. He'd used words Tucker hadn't ever thought could be intimidating. But when Tag got going, he could really let his rage flow. He nodded his brother's way. "Yeah, but Green's right. I'm starting to get a sense of the place. I've definitely been here before. I've been in this park. We're close to the apartment I took Ronnie to. I think it was Levi's place. Green was wearing jeans and a t-shirt he'd borrowed from Robert. They were both slightly too big for him, and he'd complained endlessly about how basic they were. Tucker wasn't sure why basic was a bad thing, but it was the height of horror for Green. All in all, as road trip partners went, Green was an asshole. The man loved to listen to himself talk, but not about what they wanted him to talk about. He'd refused to divulge anything important, but he'd talked a lot about his many missions and how smart he was. If he got shot, Tucker wasn't going to save him. Well, he would try because he'd taken a Hippocratic oath, but he probably wouldn't try too hard. Was it wrong to call time of death while the patient was still breathing? We should find the hotel. Robert was looking down at his cell phone. Owen said he's already here, and he found a place for us to stay. Or we could stay at my flat, Green offered. It's close. Robert's eyes rolled. Yeah, look, man, I've been up for hours, and my wife is ready to hand me my balls. I'm not up for playing Where's Waldo's French Flat. I know we don't have long, but we all need a nap and some food. MI6 is pissed, and according to Damon, they think they might have a lead on Dwyer. He didn't need a lead on Dwyer. Dwyer would find him. Dwyer might already be here, following him as he proved to be completely useless. He stared out at the entrance to the garden for a moment. There was a merry-go-round just inside the gates, with happy children bouncing on their seats as it went around and around. Violet would like that. Violet had been conceived in this city, not far from here. He was close, but they were on the wrong side of the gardens. Yes, they were very close. He needed to stop thinking about it and let himself go. Any word from Ezra? He moved down the steps, certain his brother would follow him. Hey, I thought we were going... Robert sighed and fell in step beside him. He texted a few minutes ago. He's going to try to get here later today, but Solo is pissed. She hasn't had him arrested, though. She won't, Green said, taking up on the other side of Tucker. I was lying about that. I don't think she could ever be angry enough with him that she would put his life at risk. I often think Solo's childhood led her to a bad place as an adult. She's not able to recognize real love. When it slaps her in the face? Robert asked pointedly. I regret that. Green managed to sound remorseful, but then again, if there was one thing he'd learned about the man, it was that he was an excellent actor. Solo and I can be quite passionate when it comes to our relationship. It's a bit twisted, but it's real. Far more real than anything she has with Beck. He'd talked about his girlfriend back then. Kim. They'd gotten to know each other during the training sessions Green had insisted on. Tucker had bemoaned the fact that his residency didn't leave much time for a romantic life, and Levi had countered with what happened when two CIA agents were in love and on different continents. How long had the man been delusional? How long had he been plotting to get Solo? It was starting to come back to him. Those months he'd spent prepping. Being around Green without bars between them was doing something to him. It was making it far easier to be back in those moments. We prepped for the op. You and me, he said, the path crunching beneath his feet. Yes, we did. Green's voice remained perfectly calm. Of the three of them, only Green seemed unaffected by the drama playing out around him. You were in physically good shape, but I thought you needed some defensive training. You knew how to use a rifle, but you weren't good with a handgun. We didn't have handguns at home. Though he remembered the gun case where his mom kept 2 shotguns and their granddad's rifle. They lived outside of town, where it was beautiful and quiet, and there were far more animals than people, some of which wouldn't mind eating him. What's your impression of how long we trained? Green asked. Tucker let himself walk as his mind roamed. He didn't think about where he was going. It was a couple of months, I think. I know we met in Boston. I can remember that meeting. I remember how I felt. It flowed over him easily now. He didn't have to fight for it. He could feel the breeze coming off the river, and he'd wondered if it was cool where Russ was. I was hopeful, for the first time in months. For the first time since I'd been told my brother died. I had been investigating some incidents surrounding classified intelligence getting out. I won't go into it too much, but troop movements were being leaked or sold. That investigation led me to Senator Hank MacDonald, and that's when I started watching his daughters. Faith was of no interest to me, but Hope was. Green had showed him a picture of Hope MacDonald that day, the first time he'd seen her. I thought she looked harmless. And I told you that was precisely why she was so dangerous, Green confirmed. He turned down a path, the memories whirling in his brain. You were the first person to believe me when I said I thought my brother was alive. How did you know I was alive? Robert asked. I've looked at the report on how my unit died. I didn't see anything that would raise a red flag. Emily did a good job. Oh, she didn't fake that report, Levi corrected. That was all Hank MacDonald's doing. He had connections in the military, corrupt individuals who sold out their fellow soldiers for the cash he was offering. I took care of them, by the way. It was a fun weekend project. He stopped and stared at Levi. Hey, I'm a lot of things, but I don't sell out soldiers. And before you say anything, Ezra isn't a soldier and we're at war, Levi said with a shrug. I keep telling you, I'm not the bad guy here. Taggart and his crew might have handled the MacDonalds, but there were plenty of people they missed. Retribution shouldn't simply be saved for the head of the snake. There was a body and a tail to chop up, too. But not Emily. I find it interesting that she was still hanging around. Robert's arms crossed over his chest. She had a role to play. When Tucker didn't show up for our meeting, I realized it had gone to hell, and MacDonald had him, and she had the intel. I had nothing without that intel, Green admitted. I wasn't exactly working on the books. The agency wouldn't have approved sending me in. It was the only reason he could think of. There were members of the agency who were well-versed in what MacDonald was doing. I found that out fairly quickly, Levi admitted. I had to work around people in my own group. I did not agree with the methods MacDonald used, and I really didn't like American soldiers getting treated like guinea pigs. But he seemed to have changed his mind. You've been chasing down her research ever since. Somehow I don't think you're going to destroy it. Another negligent shrug of his shoulders. Destroying MacDonald's research won't bring back the dead. It's out there, and someone will use it. I'll feel safer if it's in the right hands. Yours, Robert surmised. Mine are better than most. Tucker, do you want me to apologize for abandoning you? Should I have invaded MacDonald's compound to rescue you? First off, you wouldn't have even known who I was. If you do this and things go bad, I'll have to disavow any knowledge of you. You'll be on a tightrope, Tim, and there won't be any kind of safety net for you. He'd been warned, and he'd done it anyway. He'd had to. I don't need an apology. You were upfront about what could happen. You didn't sugarcoat anything. You needed someone who wasn't on the agency's radar to infiltrate MacDonald's operation. You had solid proof that Robert was with her. You showed me surveillance footage. And Robert, I knew you weren't dead because I went to the site of where your supposed accident occurred and talked to some of the locals. There was no accident that day. It was coming back in rapid flashes now. He'd gone into a damn war zone because he'd needed to feel close to his brother, needed to be where he'd died. He went in with a charitable group. Green sounded almost proud. He used the fact that he was a doctor to get into a place no one else could have gone. I got a report about an American in that area causing trouble. I investigated, and when I realized what he was looking for, I knew I had my guy.
What happened to the rest of my unit? Robert asked.
I can't be completely sure, Levi began. But I believe they went into MacDonald's program. They were some of her first subjects. You were the only one who survived. I think that's why you were her favorite. You were one of the first to handle the therapies well. I wish I could have saved them. He hated the idea that his brother's friends had been dying while he'd been working or sleeping or doing anything at all normal. When I think about what you gave up, Robert began. He shook his head. I would do it all again. He found himself on the other side of the park. He'd walked across, not lengthwise, but through the middle. He was here. It's on the second floor. He stared up at the elegant building with stone steps. He could see Ronnie there. She'd stopped at the top of the stairs, and he'd had his breath taken away, because she'd been so beautiful, and he'd known that his job was almost done. Green nodded. Yes. I don't own it anymore. I gave it up after you went missing. The heat was on when MacDonald left Kronberg. I had to cool my heels for a while. I knew what had happened when you didn't show up for our meeting. I knew she had you. I honestly figured she'd gotten the intelligence, and that was why she left Kronberg so quickly after. You didn't bother to look for him? Robert was staring up at the building, too. I knew where he was. I knew he was in Argentina. Again, should I have stormed the building and given up everything for a man who no longer remembered who I was? Green glanced down at his watch. We're down to 3 hours now. I personally don't care if we get Veronica back, but it seems like a deal-breaker for you. You did what? You do understand if she sees me, the whole fucking thing could blow up in our faces. She's met me before. She thinks I'm fucking her sister. Do you even remember why you're here? We were supposed to meet here, but I brought Veronica. Green had been angry with him, but he couldn't have left her behind. He'd intended to tell her everything when they got free. Katie Croft was working with us. Yes, she was. She had a lot of information about Kronberg, but she had no real idea what to do with it. She couldn't corroborate it enough to report it, but she could give it to us to help our investigation. You were key to getting her to talk to us. Green leaned against the half wall that separated the building from the sidewalk. You did an excellent job convincing her. You played the do-it-for-your-country card. I think the fact that her mother was a soldier helped her along. She was trying to make Mommy proud. I told you there was no way you slept with her, Robert said. Of course he didn't, Green agreed. No, he had a professional relationship with Katie. She wasn't the problem. If you say one more word against... He could feel the cell phone in his hand. It was early. The sun wasn't up. He'd stood right here and argued with Levi Green about where they would meet since he'd fucked everything up. In a heartbeat, he was back in the past. 3 years before. Timothy Seeger held the phone to his ear and glanced back up at the building, wishing he didn't have to leave. The night before had been everything he'd thought it could be. Ronnie was the one. His brother would love her. So would his mom. God, if this worked, they would be a family again soon. Russ would have problems. Given what he knew about the drugs MacDonald had used on his brother, he wasn't fooling himself. They would face an uphill battle when they got Russell back, but they would get him back. Do you even remember why you're here? Levi did not bother to hide his irritation with the situation. I know I changed the plan, but after what happened with Rebecca Walsh, I couldn't leave Veronica behind. It still made him sick to think about what he'd done to Dr. Walsh, but he'd had to step in. Dr. Walsh had been ready to leave. Hope MacDonald had given her a dose of the time dilation drug in a mad attempt to convince Walsh to stay. She'd needed Rebecca's genius. For all her cold ruthlessness, MacDonald lost her shit from time to time. She'd panicked at the thought of Rebecca leaving and tried a partial memory wipe. It hadn't worked, and that was when they'd started to talk about killing the pretty doctor. He'd offered them an alternative. It had been up to him to ensure Rebecca ran and never looked back. He'd used a virtual reality headset to simulate hurting the doctor. He'd known the memories would be vague and murky, and they wouldn't jibe with her physical health. But it had worked. Rebecca was safely back in the States. He couldn't put Ronnie through the same thing. A long sigh came over the line. MacDonald doesn't give a damn about your girlfriend. She couldn't care less. Do you know who she does care about? You. And now we have to meet in the open because I can't show up at my own damn safe house. He couldn't help it. He wasn't going to risk Ronnie. He was too close to getting everything he wanted. What he wasn't about to tell Levi was that he wasn't going back to Munich. MacDonald was acting suspicious, and he wasn't entirely sure she didn't know something was going on with him. It was there in the way he caught her staring at him. Like she had plans. MacDonald's plans always involved pain. Tell me where to meet you. I've got a flight back this evening. I would like to spend some time looking like the tourist I'm supposed to be. Meet me at Père Lachaise Cemetery. Go in the main entrance and walk straight up the main street. It will take you to a monument. You can't miss it. It's quiet at this time of the morning. We should be able to talk without being overheard. Take the metro. I'll be waiting for you there at 9. And watch your back. MacDonald isn't in Munich right now. She's getting the lab in Argentina ready. She'd been planning on moving Dr. Walsh there. If she'd accepted the job, Rebecca Walsh would have found herself a prisoner. She would have been forced to work or die. MacDonald thought she was close to a breakthrough, and she wasn't about to let a thing like ethics keep her from getting what she needed. Was his brother in that lab in Argentina? I hope so. I don't like not having eyes on her, Levi admitted. I'll see you in an hour, and maybe we can talk about how to use this to get your brother. Things are shaking out in a way I hadn't planned. There's a group in Dallas I'm worried is about to make a move. Levi had been talking about some ex-military guys getting involved because their brother had gone missing. I thought the Taggarts believed Theo is dead. He wasn't. Tim had seen the man not a few weeks before. MacDonald had brought him in to work with Dr. Walsh. It would have been best for me if they did, Levi admitted. I don't need that group fucking things up. I've had this planned for a very long time. I don't see why we couldn't do this back in Munich. Things would have been far easier if he'd made the handoff and gotten straight to the States. Well, I'm sorry my day job is inconveniencing you, Levi shot back. I've got more than one operation I'm working on. You're lucky I could get into Paris today. The line went dead, and he took a deep breath. He glanced back up to where Veronica was sleeping. She'd looked so delicious wrapped up in the blanket, her hair spread out across the pillow. He would tell her everything this afternoon, and pray she forgave him. 40 minutes later, he jogged up the steps that led him out of the Père Lachaise metro station, along with what seemed like half of Paris. It was easy to get lost in a city this size, but it was also why it was good cover. He'd dressed for the occasion, a ball cap covering his head, and plain t-shirt, jeans, and boots. He could be anyone. He glanced at the cafe across the street and realized why Levi hadn't picked it as their meeting place. It was mobbed. Sometimes chaos was good, but not in this case. They needed to talk. He had a flash drive to pass off. The last thing he needed to do was drop the drive in the crush of bodies. The flash drive in his pocket was the most important thing he'd ever done. It was proof of what was happening at Kronberg. Everything he'd observed and documented was in his report. The whole of Katie Croft's investigation was documented there. Conversations he'd managed to record were on that flash drive. All those names, all the people, companies, and politicians who supported the McDonald's. There were even a couple of CIA agents' names in there. Levi had made sure his people got called out too. Levi had been open and honest about the corruption in his own organization. He was going to owe Levi Green so much. He oriented himself and started walking toward the main entrance of the famous Paris cemetery. Tall white stone walls rose to the sides. He glanced down at his watch. He was early, but he still found himself walking to the entrance. The minute he walked past the main gate, it was like the world receded. The bustle of the street outside was replaced with an odd quiet, an almost eerie quiet. Levi had been right. The place was almost empty at this time of the morning. It wasn't tourist season, though there were always tourists in Paris. A chill was in the air as he started up the stone path that promised to lead to the monument known as the Aux Morts de la Commune. He'd had some time on the metro to look it up. On either side of him were monuments to the dead. They looked like small stone rooms in the middle of the forest, some ornate, others much simpler. It was utterly unlike anything they had in Wyoming. His grandfather's grave was a simple thing. The cemetery there was small. It was pretty, but nothing at all like the lush garden that was the Père Lachaise. Russell had a headstone there. Beloved husband, son, and brother. If he was right about Emily, he was damn glad there wasn't a body buried there, because he would have to change that stone. Emily had ties to the McDonald's. He was almost certain she'd had a hand in what happened to his brother. She hadn't loved Russ at all. Veronica would love him. He was going to marry her and have kids with her. 3 would be good. He'd loved having a brother, but sometimes brothers got in trouble, and it would have been awesome to have another one to have shared this particular load. So 3 it was. He felt a goofy smile cross his face. He was stupid in love. She might like this place. It was peaceful. He could hear birds calling. Their sound split the silence in an eerie way. Even the people around him seemed to move solemnly. There was a road wide enough for cars that seemed to lead to the monument where he would meet Green. There was a single van parked to his left. He moved quickly past it. It was likely a service van of some sort, though he noticed the tinted windows. He should have grabbed a cup of coffee. He trudged up the road as it gently ascended. He would make this as quick as possible, get back to Ronnie, and get to the airport where they would find the first flight that could get them to the States. It would be so fucking good to be Tim Seeger again. How fast could Levi Green turn his real identity on? He wouldn't be able to go back to Mass General, but he could finish out his residency in Laramie and be close to home. Be close to his brother. When they took down McDonald, he would get his brother back. He had to believe that. He had to trust that Green would do what he'd promised and save Russ. Up ahead, he saw the place he would meet Levi in about 20 minutes. He took a deep breath and tried to banish the anxiety playing in his brain. He felt like someone was watching him, but then he'd felt that way ever since the day he'd accepted the job at Kronberg and gone undercover. He didn't like that van. He moved off the main road, taking a right and walking on one of the smaller paths. The path here wasn't cobbled. It was well-worn dirt and gravel. The graves and tombs seemingly hundreds of years old. Some of them were phone booth-sized, the doors on the front mostly closed and locked, though he could see through the fronts. There was no glass in the windows, so a person who wanted to could see inside to the stones that marked the actual grave. Some of the tombs had chairs inside, or old planters where once flowers had grown. The spaces were dark, disuse apparent. His mother kept Russell's grave perfect, despite the fact his body wasn't there. She went to the headstone once a week and laid out flowers as though she needed the connection to her son, no matter what it was. He was getting maudlin. "Hello, brother." The sound made him turn, and then his heart threatened to stop in his chest. Tall, with broad shoulders and a jaw that could have come from a comic book hero. His brother. Russ? Was he dreaming? Had all of this been one long dream and he was back in bed with Veronica? Russell's lips turned up in a grim smile. "No, my name is Robert. I'm sorry you've been neglected, brother. Mother told me you were left behind on a mission. It was an accident. Apparently it was my fault. You know how the meds can be. I forget things. I won't do it again." What the hell? His brother was standing right there, and yet every word that came from his mouth sounded wrong. "Russell. Your name is Russell Seeger, and I'm your brother, Tim. You are from Wyoming. You were in the Army when a woman named Hope McDonald kidnapped you." He wanted to reach out and get a hand on him. If he could just put a hand on his brother, he could know he was real. He looked leaner, his body more sculpted than it had been even during his Army days. "I know what you're trying to do," Russ said with what sounded like sympathy. "It's hard when you haven't had your meds for a long time, but I'm not leaving you alone. I promise. It's going to be fine when we get back to base. And please, call me Robert." His body seemed to go cold. This was his brother, but he didn't know this man. This man stared at him like they hadn't spent their lives together, like they hadn't built pillow forts and chased each other across the lawn, like they hadn't sat up at night and wondered where their dad had gone. "Your name is Russ," he said as though he had to remind himself. This was his brother. This was Russell, and he could save him. He could find his way back. "Mom misses you so much." His brain had started to function again, the shock of seeing his brother giving way to questions. Why the hell was his brother here? He glanced behind him, and sure enough, they weren't alone. A big man with dark hair was walking up the path behind him. They'd been following him, waiting for a chance to get him in between them. McDonald was here, and she'd sent her boys after him. "Please, Russ, you have to listen to me. You don't understand what's going on," he pleaded, his heart rate tripling. This couldn't be happening. Not now. Not when he was so fucking close to getting out. He couldn't be killed by his own brother. "Mother can't miss me. I'm with her all the time," the man in Russell's body said with a humorless chuckle. "It's you she misses. I know you don't remember it, but you're part of a team, and it's time for you to come home now. You're off your medications, and it's making everything seem confusing." That was her game? He stood in the middle of the path, the dead all around him. It was the living that he was worried about. The big man who'd come up at his back was still, a predator waiting for the right time to pounce. "I'm not the one who's confused. She's feeding you a ton of drugs. She's lying to you both. She took away your memories. Do you honestly believe you were born fully grown in a lab?" If he could reach his brother, make him see some reason, there might be hope. Of course not. Russell started to move his way. "Everything is going to be so much clearer when you're back on your meds. Dante, don't you dare hurt him. You know Mother wants him brought in alive." "She said alive," Dante replied with a shrug. "She didn't say we couldn't play with him a bit." Dante lunged, and Tim took off, leaping over a stone tomb and hitting the ground on the other side. His knees hit the soft earth, and he forced himself up. He had to move and keep moving until he could find a way out. There weren't enough people here, and he would bet anything his brother and Dante had continued their training. They would be lethal, and they likely wouldn't mind hurting a few tourists to complete their mission. He needed to get back to the street where he could lose himself in the crowd. They wouldn't want to bring attention to themselves. He had to shove his way between tombs to get to a parallel path. He turned to his left, but Dante was already there. He took off to the right as his brother managed to make it through the thicket. He shoved at Russell, rushing past him and turning the first chance he got. Where was he? He had to get back to the main road. It was his best chance, but he could hear them running behind. He cut through another set of graves, scrambling over low tombs. He was confused, and probably heading the wrong direction since the path he found himself on started to climb. "Don't do this, Tucker!" Russ's voice rang out. "That's your name, you know. Mother said you likely don't even remember your own name." He slowed down because they hadn't caught up to him yet. He slid his body between two standing tombs. They were so close together he could barely manage it. "Which way did he go?" Dante asked in what sounded like a thick Eastern European accent. "You know what she'll do if we fail." "I'm not going to fail," Russ replied. "I won't let another brother down." Emotion welled inside him at those words. He was letting his brother down by hiding, but he needed more time. He couldn't let MacDonald take him. If MacDonald knew about him, had she already taken Veronica? Had she been waiting when he walked out? Don't let her be dead. She couldn't be dead. He bit back bile. How soon would Levi be here? He needed to find the monument. That's where Levi was supposed to meet him. Levi would be ready for this. All he had to do was get away. And if he didn't? He reached into the pocket of his jeans and felt the thumb drive. If she got it, there would be no need for him. If he hid it, he had something to hold over her. He could buy himself time to save Ronnie. "He's hiding," Dante said. "He didn't get away. He's in one of these bushes, or he's gotten inside the tombs." The standing tomb in front of him had elaborate grating. If he went up on his toes, he could push the drive through. If this was one of the older tombs, there might not be maintenance to sweep the inside. The little drive might survive. He might survive. He couldn't get caught with that drive on him. MacDonald would have everything she wanted, and no reason at all to keep him or Ronnie alive. If she thought Ronnie knew anything at all, she would take her out, or use her in her experiments. That couldn't happen. He could hear someone moving behind him. He had to run again, or they would be on him. He pressed up and let the drive slip through the grate. He turned and started to run, and was tackled from behind. He hit the ground with a sickening thud, all the air leaving his lungs. "It's going to be okay. You'll see." His brother. He was getting taken down by the very person he'd come to find. So close. "Very good, Robert," a familiar voice said. "Though you could have taken him closer to the van. Now we have to get him all the way back. Or you could go and ask Tomas to move the van a bit closer. That would be best." "Dante can do it," Russell said. He could feel his brother's knee on his back, keeping him right there in the dirt. "That's not what I asked, Robert." MacDonald stepped onto the path. He could see her shoes. High heels, even in the middle of a deadly chase. But then she hadn't really been the one chasing. She'd done what she loved to do. Ordered someone else to do her dirty work. The knee on his back eased up, and he found himself hauled to his feet by the big, dark-haired man his brother had called Dante. "Russell!" He started to shout, but felt something hard against his spine. "I can shoot you, and you'll still live," Dante whispered. It didn't matter, because his brother never looked back. "Hello, Stephen," MacDonald said, looking him over. I was surprised to hear you came to Paris. I was even more surprised to hear you talking to that man on the phone. Who is he? She'd duped his phone. He was usually careful about it, but phones weren't allowed in the labs, and she could have gotten to it in the locker where he left it. That explained how she'd known where he would be. He's a friend of mine. He's a CIA agent, I suspect, MacDonald said. I don't know what you're talking about. He couldn't give Levi up. She waved it off. If you think I don't have my own CIA contacts, you're more naive than I thought. So the agency has some leaks, it seems. I'll have to deal with that. It's harder since that bastard killed my father, but I'll make it work. How long have you been watching me? He wanted to know how long he'd been fucked. Oh, Kronberg has had someone watching you for days now, she said. Ever since that incident with Rebecca. It was kind of you to handle that for me. I didn't realize how seriously they would take her defection. You probably saved me a lot of headache. I was going to kill the bitch. I think that would have gotten me in trouble. Instead, you're the one who got in trouble. The man they put in charge of investigating is a smart man. He came to me when he realized you were talking to that reporter. You know she's Veronica's sister, right? Of course. He had to protect Veronica. She was completely innocent in all of this. God, he loved her, and she didn't even know his real name. I've been seeing Veronica on the sly. Wouldn't do to let anyone know I'm fucking the underlings. He smirked, an expression he'd perfected over his time as Stephen Reeser. Her sister lives in Munich. She's a kook, a crazy conspiracy theorist, but she's harmless enough. Now let's negotiate. I'm meeting with another pharmaceutical firm. You're right about the CIA guy. He wants information about Kronberg. He's going to use his influence to get me on somewhere else. All I have to do is a little espionage. I'm sick of Kronberg, and I'm sick of you putting women like Rebecca Walsh above me. She stared at him for a moment. You fooled me. Not many people can manage to do that. I will admit I find it fascinating. The man on the phone told you to remember why you're here, but he didn't mention the reason. I'm curious. That wasn't a good thing, since she was a woman who liked to study the things she found fascinating, usually by cutting them up and examining the pieces. I told you. I'm here to trade information about Kronberg for a new job. Are you going to kill me over it? He was trying to be as cool as he could. He wasn't going to give up information if he didn't have to. It was obvious she hadn't been listening in for long. He'd been careful. Not careful enough. But perhaps she truly didn't understand what he was doing here today. He called Robert Russell, the man with the gun to his spine said. Isn't that his real name? Shit. He'd forgotten he'd already given himself away. Maybe he could still work this. Sorry. He looked like someone I used to know. And then he attacked me. I didn't realize you were sending your... Who are these assholes? Bodyguards? Henchmen? Dante handles certain problems for me, she explained. As far as Robert knows, Dante is just like him and Victor and Tomas. I've got another site. One not even Kronberg knows about. I keep a few of my boys there. Robert is special. But then you know that, don't you? So you're his brother. That's how the CIA agent got to you. How did you find him? I told you, he started, but Dante's hand twisted his arm. It doesn't matter. I'll figure it out one way or another, she promised. I believe Robert has the car here. It's time for you to meet Tomas, though I suppose you'll try to call him Theo. He started to struggle, but Dante wrapped a meaty hand around his throat. I heard you. I know the truth. If you don't get into the van quietly, I'll kill Robert. Will you watch your brother die? He knew the answer to that. He couldn't do it. MacDonald had questions, and that meant he would have a shot to get out. Levi would know something was wrong when he didn't show up for their meeting. Levi would find him and save both him and his brother. He forced himself to get into that van. It would be all right. It had to be. Tucker blinked into the bright light of the midday sun. That day so long ago had come back in vivid color. His heart was racing as it had done that day, beating against his chest until he'd been knocked out. When he'd come to, he'd found a whole new world of agony. "Hey, you okay?" Robert asked. He looked to his brother, who would never know he'd been the one to turn him over. He wouldn't put that guilt on him. Both Robert and Levi were looking at him expectantly. "Yes. And I know where to schedule the meeting with Arthur Dwyer." He would get his girl back. And then he was going to take them all down. Chapter 16. Veronica had learned a lot about Arthur Dwyer in the day she'd been held by him. He was a brilliant doctor. He was a terrible criminal. Unfortunately, even terrible criminals could get in a lucky shot from time to time. "You're staying here," Arthur said from his seat in the front of the vehicle. He wasn't driving. Kronberg had sent 2 security team members with Arthur, and they had become her watchers. One of them had been with her every moment of the day. She'd woken up on a bed, and it hadn't taken her long to figure out she was in Paris. She'd listened to her captors, who seemed to think they could talk all they liked in German. Kronberg kept the apartment for their executives, and they were awaiting the outcome of Arthur's endeavor. But the bed was nice, and she would have been entirely comfortable if she hadn't had her wrists and feet bound. "I'll take Kurt with me," Arthur continued. "Your boyfriend claims he remembers where he hid the thumb drive he stole. When we have the data, we'll bring Risa back here." The man named Kurt frowned. "How will we be sure he doesn't have a copy of the data?" "Well, I wasn't planning on giving him the girl. I was planning on letting him see the girl. Then you'll give him a dose of the sedative, and we'll have a long talk about corporate espionage," Arthur explained. "I'll have to figure out how to deal with our own intelligence agency. According to the CEO, they're not happy with my play. If I can clean up the data and give them a sanitized version with all the proper scapegoats, perhaps they'll forgive my hasty actions." She would have said something about how it wouldn't work, because there was no way Tucker hadn't shared what he'd found with his group before turning it over. But she was gagged. She didn't think he would appreciate her logic anyway. But she was worried, because Tucker would absolutely turn over whatever he had, and he would come to this car looking for her. He would put himself at risk. For all Arthur was a moron when it came to criminal enterprise, if he managed to get Tucker in this car, he would be able to pass him off to more competent people, and they would both be in trouble. She'd been so wrong. It had been all she could think about since the moment Arthur had captured her. She'd been stupid to doubt Tucker. If only she'd had a little faith, Nina wouldn't have been shot, and they wouldn't be in this position. She would have to find a way to warn him what Arthur was planning. She glanced out the tinted windows of the van they'd placed her in. She couldn't tell where they were, except that the streets were crowded. It looked like some kind of park. "Keep her quiet," Arthur instructed. "If she makes trouble, dose her again, but don't kill her. I'm going to need her alive. I think our friend will speak much more freely if we've got the mother of his child as a hostage. It's too bad we couldn't nab the kid." She hated that man. "I'll be back soon." Arthur and Kurt got out of the car, and she was left alone with the guard they'd called Oscar. He sat in the driver's seat and stared straight ahead. Her hands were bound on her lap, and she was pretty sure she'd lost all feeling in them. She might have nerve damage. They hadn't cared about her circulation the way Tucker had. God, would he ever forgive her? She'd put them in this position. She'd made him risk everything he'd worked for. Had he been able to find the data, or was he lying? He would lie to save her. He might walk away from her afterward, but he would never leave her in this position. How long would it be? How long would she be sitting here waiting for him? Damn it, she had to do something. She couldn't sit here and let him sacrifice himself for her. She was not this girl. The back door was child-locked, and the windows were heavily tinted. If she kicked at the door, would anyone on the street notice? Could she make the vehicle move enough that someone realized something was wrong? Oscar was in a bad position. He couldn't simply turn and get his hands on her. It would be awkward to get to her while he was sitting in the front seat. Another way they'd underestimated her. She was about to start moving when there was a knock on the car door. "Hey, you can't park here," a masculine voice said. A familiar voice. She would have gasped had it not been for the gag in her mouth. "Hey, I'm with the police. You can't park here," he insisted. "You're going to have to move." But French police officers didn't have Scottish accents. Oscar started to lower the window, and that's when Owen's hand reached in, shoving a rag at his face. He was stuck there, caught between the seatbelt and what was likely a very potent form of chloroform. He slumped over quickly. Owen unlocked the doors, and Damon Knight was at her side untying her hands. The minute her hands were free, she pulled the gag from her mouth. "What are you doing here?" "Tucker forgot Tag. Well, Tag tagged him," Damon admitted. "I've been following the little bugger since he left the country house. I knew he would bring Owen in." Owen was grinning as he made his way around the car. "I actually went to the boss when Tucker called me. MI6 was so angry with Kronberg that they're willing to work with us. So is German intelligence. We might get out of this after all. Only if Tucker's right, and we can find that data." Damon seemed far less optimistic as he went to work on her feet. She became very aware that they weren't alone. Several men wearing suits surrounded the car. One of them pushed Oscar over and took his seat. "Don't mind them," Damon said. "They're French intelligence. Yes, we are the whole bloody world today. Let's get you out of here. Tucker's going to try to get Dwyer to admit what's going on at Kronberg before we arrest him." "Is he all right? Is Nina okay?" She had a million questions, but she remembered something important. "Arthur has a gun. So does Kurt." "And Tucker's got back up too," Owen said. "We couldn't move into place fast enough to get Green out, but we've stuffed him in a van. We've got people stationed at all the entrances and exits. He won't get away this time." "I don't think he wants to," Damon admitted. "I think he believes whatever's on that thumb drive will get him back at the agency." She slid out of the car the minute her feet were free. Blood started to rush back into her hands, and she winced from the pain. "Come on," Owen said. "We've got a couple of cars parked inside the cemetery. You can wait for Tucker there." "Or she can go back to the hotel," Damon countered. "Rebecca and Penny are there. As soon as we can manage it, we're going back to London. But we've got a bit of clean-up to do. Firstly, we'll have to debrief with the French, since we're doing all of this in their backyard. You have no idea how happy I am that Tag is in Dallas. Getting him to sit through a debrief with 4 bloody intelligence agencies without starting a war would be a miracle." "What is going on?" She didn't understand a thing. 1 minute she'd been sure everything would go to hell, and now they were joking? Owen stopped. "It's all right, Veronica. We've got everything under control." "Well, that's not exactly true." Damon moved to her other side so she was surrounded as he herded her along. "We're not entirely sure Tucker knows where the data is. He says he stashed it somewhere in the cemetery. It's been over 3 years. We're not sure it's still here. If it's not, we'll have some work to do. Tucker remembers what happened, but without solid proof, we'll have to maneuver our way out. Tucker's all right? I don't even understand what's going on. Arthur got scared. His name is on that list. Kronberg never wanted it found. I think the drugs they were going to use on him would have done the opposite of what they said. She hurried to keep up with the taller men. Yes, I think when Dwyer realized no one would let him use his drugs, he panicked, and Kronberg likely did too. Damon concurred. From their end, this whole thing is a mess. German intelligence was working with them, and now I suspect they won't listen to anything Kronberg tells them. They've got agents watching the houses of the board of directors, in case one of them attempts to flee the country. They'll throw Dwyer under the bus, Owen said with a shake of his head. No doubt about it. Those big companies know how to survive. Why let Tucker meet with him at all? She didn't like the idea. Why not simply arrest Arthur when he shows up at the meet site? Damon stopped as they reached the massive entryway to the Père Lachaise cemetery. She recognized the twin pillars that marked one of the entryways because she'd come here years before with her sister. She and Katie had spent the weekend in Paris, and a whole afternoon wandering the peaceful grounds of the cemetery. That's about you, I suspect, Damon said. He wants to get as much information out of Arthur before the Germans take him. We had to agree that they got custody of Dwyer and any Kronberg employees. Tucker is recording everything the man says. He's alone out there. She didn't care how many agents were in that cemetery. She didn't want Tucker going up against Dwyer and the big guard without someone directly at his side. Hell, she didn't want him in there at all. Robert is with him. Owen gestured to the main road through the cemetery. It wasn't a thoroughfare and was supposed to be used only for special occasions, but there were several vans parked inside now. Levi Green turned himself in. Ezra's watching him in one of the vans. I don't like it, boss. Green is planning something. I don't see what he can do. Don't think I haven't gone over it again and again in my head. He can't steal the data. He won't be allowed close enough to it, Damon explained. That is, if it's even here. Anything could have happened to it over the years. Happened to what? She asked. The day he was taken, he was supposed to pass off a thumb drive to Levi Green, Owen explained. He was supposed to meet Green here at the cemetery, because you were back at the original meet spot. The apartment? God, it really had been her fault. If he hadn't taken her with him, things might have been different. Yes, that's where they had been planning to meet, Damon agreed. Unfortunately, Tucker didn't realize that they'd tagged his phone. It was a rookie mistake, and I blame Green. He should never have sent in a civilian. MacDonald knew he was going to be in Paris, and she followed him. Owen continued. Green and Tucker discussed where they were going to meet over their mobiles, and she set up an ambush. She didn't even realize he'd stolen the intelligence from Kronberg. She thought he was passing off your sister's research. And this is why I think something's up. Why didn't Green let him copy the drive and send it to him? All of this could have been avoided with a simple email. That's not how spies work, Owen, Damon said, as though they'd gone over this. I don't know what his thought process was, but I know I've worked operations this way from time to time. If the material was sensitive enough, they wouldn't want any chance that it could have been hacked. There's also the possibility that there are agency names on that list. It still doesn't seem right to me. Owen put a hand on her shoulder. Come on, Ronnie. You can stay with me until Tucker has got what he needs. There was the sound of a shot splitting the peace of the cemetery, and then shouts. Bloody hell. Damon cursed and took off running. I would tell you to stay behind, but we might need a doctor. You stay close to me, Owen ordered. But she was already following Damon, and praying she got there in time. Tucker took a deep breath as he realized he was in the right place. You do understand that all I have to do to end Veronica's life is send the text that's on my phone. Dwyer had his phone in one hand, and his other was in the pocket of his coat, where he was carrying a semi-automatic pistol. He'd flashed it when they'd first met, before he'd had Kurt frisk them both.
You've said that a couple of times.
He wasn't sure how they'd done it, but this part of the cemetery was quiet. Oh, there were enough people walking by that he was certain Dwyer wasn't suspicious, but Tucker knew an agent when he saw one, and the pair that had just passed them while arguing over a map of the cemetery had definitely been agents. Damon had worked quickly, but then the whole London team had been monitoring his ass. Literally. He was fairly certain the tracker was in one of his butt cheeks. He was going to put one in Ronnie's. Except she likely would hate him, because from what he could tell, he had been involved in her sister's death. He'd been the reason Kronberg decided to kill Katie Croft. Do you want the actual data I stole or not? Rob, can you check this one? Shine a light in there. Robert stepped up and pulled out the small flashlight he was carrying for just this occasion. He'd been frisked by the big guard Dwyer had called Kurt. This one has nothing at all in it. They were moving down the row of tombs. The cure hadn't crystallized his memory down to the actual tomb he'd shoved that drive into, but he was sure he was on the right path. It was one of these. He remembered the grave he'd had to scramble over to get away from his brother. Of course I want that data, Dwyer replied, but we can't spend the afternoon here. We should come back when it's dark. I'm not leaving Ronnie with you. He knew exactly what would happen if he allowed himself to be taken into custody. He wouldn't ever leave it again. Give me 15 minutes. If I can hand it to you, we can make this a clean break. You remembered where it was. How do I know you don't remember what's on it? Dwyer asked. Robert sent him a knowing look as he moved on to the next tomb. They'd already figured out that Dwyer's name was on that list. Kronberg had panicked when he wouldn't take the drugs they'd offered to help his memory along. I never looked at it. I had a mission. I was supposed to break into that safe and get the thumb drive. I then went to Katie Croft's house, and I uploaded the information she'd found during her investigation. I read neither report. I uploaded Katie's information with her permission. She'd been working with my CIA contact for months. You could be lying, Dwyer countered. Do you honestly believe I memorized a list of names? He was glad Damon had been in the city. It made him perfectly safe to do what he needed to do. And there would be none of these questions when he did find the drive, because someone had been watching him all along. It would make it far easier for him to have a normal life if the world's intelligence agencies believed they had what he'd stolen that day. He could fade into the background and find a normal life. He would move to where Ronnie wanted to raise Vi and be a part of their lives. If she would let him. Dwyer looked around, his anxiety apparent. In some ways he felt sorry for the bastard. He knew what it was like to be shoved into a job he hadn't been prepared for at all. Green might have given him some training, but there was far more to the spy business. After all, he'd proven to be bad at it. He hadn't even known he was being followed those weeks before that fateful day in Paris. I would have tried, Dwyer said, looking around again as though he were starting to understand something was wrong. I think we should go. You've already broken our agreement once. By bringing Rob with him. He's my brother. He wouldn't let me come alone. The tomb in front of him made the hair on his arms stand straight. The grating on the dilapidated door was so familiar. How can I know you didn't bring someone else? Dwyer looked to Kurt, who was guarding his back. Kurt simply frowned. I didn't see anyone else, boss. Robert, I think this might be it. He pointed to the door. I was in between these two tombs, hiding from MacDonald. I made the decision to dump the thumb drive because I didn't want her to get her hands on it. It's here. Dwyer moved forward. Robert shined the light inside. There's a statue. I'm sure it's some kind of memorial. Open the doors, Dwyer ordered. It could have fallen on the floor and been missed. I doubt they do more than basic maintenance on these. Some of them are covered with leaves and vegetation. He had to hope that was the case here. He would hate to think someone had found it, and it had sat in a lost and found or been dumped in the trash. It's locked. Robert gently pulled on the ornate doors that locked the tomb off from the world. Does anyone have something I can use as a pick? He'd come prepared. After a heinously long lecture, where Damon used some very British threats, they'd prepped with the flashlight and a couple of paper clips he'd manipulated. Here, try this. Rob took the paperclip and went to work on the lock. I don't like this, Kurt said. It's too quiet. Kurt proved he was far better at this game than Dwyer. He wouldn't have long to get the information he wanted. He turned to Dwyer. Did you have a hand in Katie Croft's murder? I mean, we're sharing, right? The question seemed to shake Dwyer. She was close to putting together some details we didn't want connected. That sparked his memory. Katie had done excellent work. He hadn't read her final report, but she'd walked him through her research. She'd managed to get financial records that tied Kronberg to a man named Neeland. He ran a vast corporate empire. She connected Kronberg to the Neeland Corporation. She thought Al Neeland was the head of the collective. Simon and Chelsea Weston had taken him down with the help of the McKay-Taggart team long before MacDonald came on the radar, but the connections had been there for a brilliant reporter to find. Katie had been putting together the labyrinthine arms that connected the collective. She'd given him her data because she'd worried about reprisals. She hadn't trusted anyone with the story because the collective owned many media outlets. She'd put all her hard work in Tucker's hands because she'd believed he loved her sister. He'd failed her so badly. The gun made an appearance. Yes, the board knew about her investigation. It was precisely why we brought Veronica onto the team. We thought she would be a good tool against her sister. She turned out to be one for you, too. MacDonald didn't understand how bad it was getting. She should have handed you over to us, but she was arrogant. She thought she was the only one in danger. She didn't think about the company at all. Instead of learning your secrets, she dosed you with the drug, and anything you knew was lost to us. How odd to think that MacDonald's mistake had very likely led to Ronnie's relative freedom. If she'd known he had valuable intel, she would have used Ronnie against him. She would have tortured her and given her any number of drugs that could have hurt their baby. Losing his memory had saved his daughter. He would take that. Rob, I think we can finish this now. He had enough. He knew what had happened. I've been here before. Rob had gone an ashen shade, and he stood in front of the door, the makeshift lockpick in his hands. He hadn't counted on this. Not for a second had he thought Rob might remember. Hey, let it go. You can't get sick now. Open that door, Dwyer insisted. Kurt moved in. I'll do it, and then we have to go. Something is wrong. I think we're being watched. Robert had a hand to his head. I was here. And you were here. Let it go, Rob. It doesn't matter. The last thing he needed was his brother to lose his shit. You tried to tell me. You begged me. God, you begged me, Rob said. There was a loud bang as Kurt kicked the door to the tomb in. He had to pray he'd given Damon and Owen enough time to get Ronnie out. They'd promised they would do it the second Dwyer walked away. What's wrong with him? Dwyer glanced around like a man who knew something was about to happen. That was the moment the intelligence agencies made their play. The couple who'd argued moments before were back, guns drawn and shouting in German for Arthur to put the gun down. The head of MI6 rushed in from the right with a couple of his people. Stand down, Dwyer. You're not going anywhere. Oh, he will come home with me and face what he has done, the German intelligence officer said. Dwyer looked like a deer in the headlights. He started to turn, but Solo was there. She frowned at Dwyer, cutting him off. She looked Tucker's way, her eyes narrow with irritation. You're going to get a spanking, little boy. Yeah, he'd known he would be in trouble with Solo, but they would have to work that out later. Robert was standing by the doors of the tomb, and the man who'd just walked in had a gun. Robert, get out of the line of fire, he said. Kurt stepped out of the tomb, holding the drive in his hand. It was there. The moment he realized he was caught, he brought up his gun and fired at the first person he could. Solo. Luckily, Solo moved fast. She ducked and rolled, and before the shot had stopped ringing through the trees, she'd taken her own. Dwyer turned Tucker's way as his guard hit his knees, a hole in his chest. Why couldn't you have stayed dead? Dwyer asked. And Tucker knew what he was about to do. Dwyer raised his weapon, and he heard Solo shout out. The world seemed to slow down, and he knew Dwyer wasn't going out alone. But then Arthur had always been that way. Arthur had been far closer to MacDonald than he'd let on. Yes, now that he was staring at Dwyer, he remembered how the man had worked with her, had been the bridge between her and the higher-ups. This was what he'd been trying to protect. He'd panicked when he'd realized Tucker might actually remember working side by side with him. But it didn't matter now, because Dwyer pulled the trigger. He heard a roar, and suddenly he was tackled, his body slamming against the rocks and dirt. His head hit, and the world went woozy. His breath knocked out of his chest, and pain flared through him. He could hear the sound of another gun going off. He saw Dwyer hit the ground not far from him. And then his brother was staring down at him. Robert. Robert had thrown himself in front of Dwyer's bullet. Rob. He could barely speak. His head was throbbing. Robert's head came up. Couldn't do it again. Couldn't let them take you. I'm so sorry, brother. Forgive me. What? Are you okay? He was pretty sure he was okay since he hadn't felt a bullet hit his body. Tell Ariel I love her, Robert said. What the fuck was happening? His brother was draped across him, dead weight on his body. But he couldn't seem to make his brain work. His vision was in and out. Concussion. He'd hit his head. But something worse had happened to Rob. He was sure of it. Hey, Tucker. Solo was above him, staring down. I'm not great with the medical stuff. He's got a bullet in his abdomen. Should I wait for an ambulance? Rob? He was so woozy. What was happening to Rob? His brother stared down at him. We almost made it. Almost made it all the way home. Robert's head dropped down, and Tucker's heart threatened to explode. Move him off now, a familiar voice said. Lay him out, and I'm going to need something to stop the bleed. Ronnie. Ronnie was here, and she was taking charge. In a group of intimidating people, all of them with guns, his Ronnie was handling them, ordering them around. He prayed his Ronnie could save his brother. They'd almost made it. It was his last thought as the darkness took him. Chapter 17. Is he here yet? Ronnie turned at the sound of her mother's voice. It had been a week since that horrible day in the cemetery, and it felt like everything had changed. Not all of it for the better. One thing was fantastic, though. Her mom and daughter were back. Her mom walked out of the apartment with Violet on her hip. He's supposed to be here any minute. Tucker hadn't left Paris when the rest of them had. He'd stayed at his brother's bedside while he recovered. He texted me that they were in London finally. Texted you? Her mother's brows rose. He can't call? I told you we're in a weird place. She'd saved his brother, and he'd been profuse in his appreciation of that act. But he'd also been distant. He'd been diagnosed with a concussion, and he hadn't complained when she'd stayed with him that first night. When he'd been released, however, he'd explained that he could take care of himself, and she should go to New York to be with their daughter. Instead, she'd come to London and brought her family here, to wait for him. Physically, he's all right, her mom asked. She reached out to her baby, who grinned that adorable, way too like her father grin, and came into her arms. Ronnie breathed her in, so grateful to have her back. He's fine. Robert's fine. They wanted to hold him for a few days because he started to develop an infection, but it's cleared up now. Her mom put her hands on her hips, her general pose. Then what's the problem that he can't call? Does he even know Violet's here? She grimaced as Vi started bouncing up and down in her arms. He doesn't know I'm here, so he wouldn't know about Vi either. Or at least, I'm not sure he knows. The last time we talked in person, I was going to New York to be with you. It's what he suggested. Because he thinks you turned him into MacDonald. She shook her head. Despite her mother's attempts to get her to talk, she'd worked her way around this subject. No, he knows that's not what happened. According to Taggart, it was Tucker's relationship with Katie that got him in trouble, her mother said flatly. That and a true clusterfuck of a situation. It seems to me everything happened at once, and that led to him being caught. I don't understand why he would blame you. She felt her eyes widen, because she'd been trying for days to figure out how to tell her mother Tucker had known Katie. Mom, I don't think he was using Katie. A frown crossed her mother's face. Of course he wasn't. I'm a little worried Katie was using him. She was always ambitious. If anything, it was that CIA agent that used them both. What does that look about? I didn't think you knew about the connection between them. I've been trying to figure out how to explain it to you. And you're right about Green. We had this big debrief and Solo got Levi Green to admit he was the reason Katie didn't think anything was wrong. When she didn't hear anything from Tucker, she called him, and he told her to hang tight. Anger welled fast and true. She hated Levi Green. When everything had gone to hell, Levi Green hadn't tried to save Tucker. He'd shut everything down, including leaving her sister in the dark about the fact that MacDonald and Kronberg were onto them. He'd planted that bomb as surely as whichever Kronberg-paid assassin had. Her mom reached up and gently wiped away the tears she hadn't realized she was shedding. I know about that, too. I'm angry, but anger isn't going to help us today. We'll get that bastard in the end. I promise. She sniffled, shoving the rage down because her mother was right. How did you know? Taggart's been keeping me up to date on everything, her mom explained. I've been playing this online war game with the Dallas boys. Taggart's a fairly good tactician, but no matter what he says, his hand-eye coordination could use some work. In the middle of shooting the shit out of each other, he gave me updates on what was happening. I also know way too much about his wife's pregnancy cravings. They are not all food. I'm still trying to process the fact that Katie had this whole thing going on in her life that she never talked to me about. I really thought Green was a guy she was dating. I'm kind of shocked my sister thought she needed a cover with me. She was obviously trying to protect you, her mother pointed out. She knew she had something dangerous and she tried to turn it over to a professional. And don't start in on how you probably could have saved her. She didn't talk to me about it either, and I had connections that could have helped. Your sister was always independent. I would give anything to have her with us today. But I'm not going to play games with what could have been. That's the way to waste your life. The thought of her mother finally moving on brought tears to her eyes. I think Tucker was trying to help her. But, Mom, when I first found out about their connection, I accused him of a whole lot of things that weren't true. I don't think he's going to forgive me for that. Have you asked him to? She'd tried to connect with him. She'd sat at his bedside while they'd diagnosed his concussion. When they'd gone to the debrief, she'd been beside him as she'd told her side of what had happened. But after it was over, he'd sent her away. Not directly, but he's been so worried about his brother that I didn't want to push him. There was the sound of a door closing, and then Nina Blunt was walking down the hall. The lovely redhead looked like she'd never taken a bullet to the chest. She was coming out of the apartment Tucker had once shared with Robert. She locked it behind her and smiled as she caught sight of them. Hey, you two. I was wondering if you were going down to greet our lads. Ariel texted me to say they're almost here. I wanted to make sure Tucker's place was ready for them. He's staying in his apartment. The minute the words were out of her mouth, she realized how dumb they sounded. Of course he was. As far as she knew, he wasn't aware she was home. When had she started to think of the garden that way? It wasn't, truly. Tucker was home, and wherever he was, that was her home. Nina's bright expression dimmed a bit. Yes, he didn't say anything about moving you in. He told me he needed to make sure he had some clean sheets because he'd left so quickly. We all did. I made sure it was comfy for him. I checked on Rob and Ari's place, too. Rob's being a massive baby about getting shot. It's surprising, since it happened so frequently to him. You would think he would be used to it by now. Men. They should think twice about getting dangerous jobs if they're going to whine every time someone shoots them. Me, I was up the next day. I had my surgery, and then it was back to work. Her mom nodded. Males are always the worst patients. They're all as soft as their mamas made 'em. And it sounds like Tucker's being a whiny man-baby. He got his feelings hurt, and like all men, he's extra sensitive. Nina looked Ronnie's way. I thought for sure you would have worked it out. Usually watching a loved one be kidnapped does the trick. Is he making you work even harder? Have you pointed out that you were kidnapped, and that means everything should bloody well be forgiven? She kind of thought Nina had been reading too many romance novels. I don't think it works that way. There was noise from down below, and she watched as a massive ball of fur barreled across the garden's floor. Buster barked wildly, and his whole body wriggled and squirmed and jumped as Jack Seaborn walked in, followed by the rest of the party. River was right behind her dog, running to her husband and jumping into his arms. She couldn't hear what they were saying. Well, what the humans were saying. But she knew the words. I love you. I missed you. Let's never be apart again. Pup, pup, Vi said, looking down at the happy reunion. Her girl was going to be a dog person. No doubt about it. She loved watching Buster's antics. It wouldn't be long before she would want a pup of her own. Tucker walked in and smiled at his friends, his brother right behind him. Ariel had a hand on both of them. Ariel was part of Tucker's family. She'd been the one he was comfortable with. Ronnie was the one who'd been left out. He hadn't wanted her there. He looked up, and their eyes caught. A look of complete shock hit his face. Tucker dropped the bag he'd been carrying and said something to his brother, who looked up too. Robert caught her gaze and put a hand over his heart, as though touching the place where the bullet had almost killed him. He nodded her way and said something to his brother. Tucker took off. He jogged to the elevator and pushed it several times as though he could force the thing to come open. He was coming for her. Her heart was in her throat because he hadn't looked like a man who was unhappy to see her. Maybe he'd forgiven her in the days they'd spent apart. "He doesn't look like he's mad at you," her mom said with a shake of her head. She felt a smile cross her face as the doors to the elevator opened and Tucker strode out. "I thought you were in New York," he said, opening his arms. "I thought it would be weeks before I saw her. Hey, baby girl. God, I missed you." She felt like someone had tossed a vat of freezing water her way. He was talking about Vi. All that sweet energy and enthusiasm had been for their daughter, not for her. Vi was already reaching out for her dad, and she had to move fast so she didn't fall. Father and daughter hugged, fitting together like two puzzle pieces. He wrapped her up in his strong arms, and she snuggled against him. His eyes closed, like this was what he'd been longing for. Tears welled hard and fast, because it was a beautiful sight, and it also made her heart ache. When his eyes came open, he looked her way. "Thank you for bringing her here." All she could do was nod. Words completely escaped her. "Can I take her for a while?" She nodded again, and then watched as he walked back to the elevators. "You want to go see Buster, Vi? Pup," he was saying as he whisked her away to show her off to his family. Vi was bouncing happily in her father's arms as the doors closed. "That was cold," Nina said with a frown. "He does remember you got kidnapped, right? I heard he took a blow to the head." "He knows." She wiped away tears. They wouldn't do her any good. At some point she would have to sit down with him, and they would be adults about the situation. They would calmly and patiently talk about how best to raise their daughter. They would have to decide if they were going to try to live in the same city, maybe even the same country. Her mom was going back to the States. She'd already accepted a job at McKay Taggart in Dallas. If she was going to stay a single mom, she would need to be close to her mother. Would Tucker be satisfied seeing his daughter a few times a year? "Or he's a dumbass," her mom pointed out. "Like I said, men are sensitive and sometimes they need to be taken in hand. You just let him walk out. You didn't even try, baby. That's not who I raised you to be. I know you want a knight in shining armor to come and sweep you off your feet, but sometimes a woman has to put that armor on herself and fix the situation." "Oh, I don't think she should put on armor," Nina disagreed. "I think she should take it all off." "Boobs can be like armor at the right time," her mother mused. Maybe she shouldn't try to live too close to her mom. "What are you saying?" Nina moved beside her mom, a united front. "Do you want him?" "Yes." She wanted him more than anything. And not for his fatherly skills. Not for his hot bod. Not even for the tracker in his buttocks that came in handy. She wanted him because no one in her life had ever had a stronger heart, a more open and loving soul. She wanted him because she'd never loved anyone the way she did him. "Then fight for your man," Nina said. "And by fight, I mean let's tempt him until he can't see straight. You see, everyone will tell you the way to a man's heart is through his stomach." Her mom shook her head. "It's his penis. It's always his penis." Yep, her mom was a bad influence. Was she brave enough to try it? "What are you thinking?" Nina got the brightest smile on her face. She leaned in, and they began to plot. Hours later, Tucker looked around his brother's apartment and realized he would have to go to his own soon. "That woman is incredibly intimidating," Robert said, closing the door on Sandra and Vi. She'd been the one to come down to take Violet to bed. She'd been the one earlier in the evening who'd dropped off Violet's bag with a smirk and told him not to let her explode. He hadn't been sure what that meant until about 30 minutes after he'd fed her dinner. Robert and Ariel were definitely putting off the baby-making for a while. Sandra had facilitated his evening with Violet. She'd also facilitated Ronnie not having to see him. They hadn't spoken at all. She'd nodded twice, and then he'd walked away. He'd been shocked to see Ronnie. He truly hadn't believed that she would be waiting here for him. Seeing her standing there with Violet had made his heart threaten to stop. And then he'd remembered all the accusations, all the suspicion. Every reason he'd sent her away had come back to slap him in the face, and he'd forced himself to focus on Violet. She is, Tucker agreed. That's probably why Tagg hired her. She's going to work at McKay Taggart. I'm not sure what she's going to do there. Amuse Big Tagg, I suspect, Robert said, easing into the chair across from him. You sure you didn't want to go with her and help put Violet to bed? She was already asleep. She'd drifted off while he'd rocked her and talked to Robert. I think you were trying to avoid Ronnie. Ariel walked out from the kitchen and put a mug of tea in front of them both. He was definitely trying to avoid Veronica. He hasn't even walked into his flat, because he would have to walk past hers, and he's afraid he'll knock on the door. Or maybe that she'll be there, waiting for him. She's not, by the way. Of course she wasn't. I'm not afraid of Ronnie. I'm giving her space. You're giving yourself space, Robert argued. Maybe he was. I thought she would be in New York. Someone should have told me she was here. Ariel sighed and leaned over to kiss her husband's forehead. I think they were worried you wouldn't come home. Or maybe they thought it wasn't a terrible thing to have your daughter waiting here for you. You can't ignore Veronica forever. I'm not going to. But a few days wouldn't hurt. I'll talk to her in my own time. Fine. I know when I'm not wanted, Ariel said. I'll be in the bedroom reading. You take it easy. I don't want you to overdo it. The docs are going to look you over tomorrow. You should know I told them to be very pessimistic about your outlook. Rob smiled up at his wife. I'm sure you did. Love you. Ariel winked and walked away. What did that mean? Why would they be pessimistic? Had his brother been holding back on him? Because Ariel wants me to take a couple of weeks off, he replied. She thinks I need the excuse to relax, but she's wrong. I'm seriously thinking about heading to Loa Mali for a nice long vacation before we decide what to do with the rest of our lives. We're done. I'm still having a hard time believing it. I mean, I know we still have work to do, but we're all free. Nothing's been decided yet. They're still analyzing the data. Solo hasn't even seen it yet, Tucker pointed out. With all the chaos, we weren't able to make that copy I was planning on. The agency has a copy, and so do the Germans, MI6, and the French, Robert said. Connor Sparks said he's going to make sure we get to see that data, too. He's also assured us the president will do everything Solo promised. He's working on getting you a proper passport. With his real name. He still wasn't used to Tim. Tucker might be his nickname for life, but it was damn good to be a Seeger again. I believe that. You and Jax are going to get your lives back, and we have some decisions to make. I want to find Mom. It was distressing that he'd remembered so much, but he couldn't remember her name. He couldn't remember the name of the town they'd grown up in. I do too, Robert said. And I suspect now that Green is back in custody, he won't be giving us any more information. I don't know. I'm hoping Solo will find something. She's supposed to be back here in a couple of days to update us. If Green won't tell us, then we'll go to Wyoming. We both seem to remember best when we're in the actual places the events took place. We'll rent a car and go to every single small town we can. About remembering things, he began. I didn't tell you what happened that day because I don't blame you. Robert picked up the tea Ariel had left. I wish this was a beer, but I'm on tons of meds and that means no alcohol. He took a quick sip
and grimaced. And it's herbal. That day has been haunting me ever since I got a hint of what happened in that cemetery. I remember you begging me. Tucker shook his head. You didn't know who I was. I didn't even listen. Guilt flavored every word that came out of his brother's mouth. Maybe if I had, I could have saved all of us. You were trained not to listen. He'd been thinking for days about how to handle this particular conversation. Luckily, he had history on his side. Hey, you remember what happened after you got out? A wary look came into his brother's eyes. I went to Dallas. Yes. You went to Dallas with Theo, and you both worked with that team for a while. You used to go grab lunch with him. Do you remember? You and Theo were grabbing lunch at a park, and what happened? MacDonald tried to get us back, Robert replied, his jaw tightening with the memory. MacDonald had given her B team a mission. They were to recapture the A team at all cost, and it had cost them much. He'd lost 2 of the men on his team that day. I was there. I was one of the men who tried to drag you back to hell, and I did it because I genuinely believed it was my job. Jax was there. Robert sat back, shaking his head. God, I hadn't even thought about that. If it hadn't been for the guys from MT, you and Theo would have gone back into the program, and it would have been me taking you there. He needed to press this point home because he didn't want this guilt to come between him and his brother. I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to be honest with yourself and with me. Would you have blamed me? Absolutely not, Robert said as quickly as he could. That was not your fault. And it wasn't yours either, he replied, making his point. But saving me in the cemetery was. And we need to make sure we never do that again. I don't think your wife can handle you getting shot a 3rd time. Oh, I've been shot way more than that. But I guess it has been a bad run lately. Robert sighed, a relieved sound. Okay, I promise to try to never get shot again. I've got too much to live for, and so do you. What are you going to do about Ronnie? Did she ask you to stay away? He shook his head. Not at all. She tried to stay with me in Paris. I asked her to leave. A brow rose over his brother's eyes. Really? Why would you do that? I thought you wanted to get back together with her. Did you change your mind? No, but think about it. She doesn't mean it. She went through something traumatic, and I look safe to her. When things calm down, she's going to still have all those questions. He didn't think he could handle living with her and being a family only to have this all come back up again, a few months down the line. Robert shook his head. She won't have questions because now we have answers. She knows you didn't sleep with her sister. She knows Green was the reason Katie was still sitting there when Kronberg decided to take her out. If he'd given her a heads up, she would likely have taken Ronnie and run. He would love to pay Green back for that bit of business. He hoped the asshole was getting tortured again, but feared turning that data over meant Green might get out free and clear. Yeah, but I was still working with her. I still got Katie into a situation that ended up getting her killed. Ronnie will always remember that. Do you honestly believe Sandra doesn't know what happened? Robert asked. Because I happen to know she talks to Big Tag on a daily basis. She didn't kill you when she saw you. She took Vi, said you looked like hell, and told you to come by for breakfast in the morning if you found your balls. That was practically a declaration of love from one of the toughest women I've ever met. She doesn't blame you, and that means neither does Ronnie. I don't know. She didn't talk about it back in Paris. We didn't talk about anything, really. She told me about Violet and what she's been doing, he admitted.
and we talked about you and your recovery. We pretty much avoided anything personal. We? Or you? I don't know. But he did. Ronnie wasn't good at hiding her feelings. She wore them all over her face. He'd seen the hurt in her eyes when he'd explained he thought she should go to New York to be with Violet. Okay, yeah, it was me. I avoided it because I didn't want to hear her say she wanted me again. I know she knows now. She knows she was wrong about me betraying her with her sister. She might even be okay with me lying about knowing her sister, but she didn't believe me. Shouldn't she have had faith in me? That was what gnawed at him. He could still remember how she'd looked at him, like she hadn't known him at all. He'd felt so small, and coming from her, it had been awful. You know relationships are rough, and they're especially rough in the beginning. What Ronnie's been through. I can't imagine that it's easy for her to trust anyone. I know you're the weirdo who can go through all the pain in the world and still not expect to get kicked again, but the rest of us aren't like that. I held Ari off forever because I didn't think I deserved her. It's not the same, Tucker argued, but it is. I know you had a good reason, but you lied to her. It might have been a good thing at the time, but it impacted her, and she needed time to process it. You think she shouldn't have a single doubt about a relationship that's already devastated her once? Put that way, it did seem like he was being sensitive. I didn't mean to hurt her. And it sounds like she was trying to forgive you. I don't think Sandra is that kind to you if she believes her daughter wants to cut you out of her life. Kind? What conversation had his brother overheard? She asked if I needed a cream for my vagina. Robert snorted. Yeah, she's not the most politic of mother-in-laws. She's going to be a blast at Thanksgivings. Mom will think she's funny. His family life would be interesting, and yet he wanted it. Turning Vi over for the night had been rough. He'd wanted to take her back to her mother himself and lay down the law. They were going to be a family. They were going to be together, and he would spend the rest of his life showing her how much he loved her. You should go to her, Robert said. He really should. Ariel popped out from behind the bedroom door. I think he'll find she's downstairs. Why would she be downstairs? It was late. Damon had closed down the club for a few nights while they all recovered. Ariel's eyes glittered with mischief. I think you should go find out. And it took you long enough. He stood up. Maybe it was time to be brave. Chapter 18. The ground floor of the garden was quiet, and he started to get suspicious that this was a setup. Ariel had known something was going on, but she wouldn't say a word. Ronnie was making her play, and he didn't think it was to shut him out. He wasn't completely foolish. He'd seen the way her eyes lit up when he'd walked out of the elevator, and he'd seen the way she'd shut down when he'd taken Vi and left her behind. Could he trust that she wouldn't change her mind? That these feelings for him weren't the result of almost dying? No one was down here. Had she gone back to her place? He glanced to his right and realized where she would go. The privacy rooms. He stepped up, and the doors opened with their high-tech swish. Nina sat at the security desk. She gave him a brilliant smile and hopped off the stool, her arms open in greeting. Hey, you look amazing for a woman who was recently shot. He hugged her, grateful he'd been able to have a hand in saving her. Well, I had some very good doctors, and I suspect I had an angel who sacrificed herself to save me. Nina stepped back. She won't admit it, but I'm almost certain she went with him when she had a chance to run. She did it because he threatened me. I can believe that. Ronnie was good deep down, and that was why he worried she would have trouble forgetting the past once the glow of surviving the storm had passed. "She's in room 4, of course," Nina said. "I'm going to leave you two alone for the evening, unless you're planning on telling her you're done. Then I think I should go back there. She's not exactly dressed for the breakup conversation, if you know what I mean." Every muscle in his body tightened at the thought of what she was, or wasn't, wearing. She was waiting in that room where they'd made love, and he wanted so badly to walk back there and take her, imprint himself on her. But he had to be careful, for both their sakes. "It's not my intention to hurt her." But she was having second thoughts, he said, hating the fact that he couldn't make this simple. It felt like it should be simple, but he'd learned that nothing in life was. "She's not having them now, I assure you." "She's been through a lot." Nina shook her head. "No, you don't get to do that, Tucker. You don't get to decide how she's feeling. You don't get to know better than her. If you're hesitating, be honest about why you're doing it. You got hurt, and you're scared you'll get hurt again." He needed to see her. Maybe he would walk in that room and it would all be clear to him. I don't know. I guess I've been through a lot too. But maybe she's right. Maybe this is how we should work things out. They could talk and not get to the heart of the problem. Sometimes words got in the way. "Go ahead and go. I know the security code. I'll take care of her." "See that you do," Nina said with a jaunty salute. "She's a smart lady. She knows what she wants." The doors opened and then closed as Nina left, and he was alone with the only woman in the world he wanted. She'd hurt him. He'd hurt her. He hadn't meant to. He hadn't meant to leave her, but he had. She'd spent years believing that he'd dumped her and left her pregnant, and she'd still come back to him, still found a way to shove that ache aside. He'd asked her to have some faith. Shouldn't he have some too? He strode down the hall and opened the door to number 4. And stopped entirely. His breath held for a moment because she was on the bed, her arms tied down, her body completely naked. She was soft and vulnerable. And what had it taken for her to open herself up like this when he'd basically rejected her hours earlier? Hey, gorgeous. He loved her. In the end, it really was simple. He loved her. If she had doubts, he would put them to rest. If she questioned his devotion, he would give her answers with his lips and his tongue and his cock. He would love her so long and so well, she would know he would never leave her again. Her head came up, and she gasped before settling back and attempting to look like she wasn't nervous. She was. He could tell by the way she bit her bottom lip. "Hi. Is Vi asleep?" All of his own doubts slid away. Robert was right. A relationship would always have its troubles, but it was up to them to stick together, and they couldn't do that if he was off somewhere nursing his hurt feelings. Ronnie was offering him everything, and he wasn't about to turn her down because it might, somewhere down the line, get difficult. It would get difficult, and they would fix it. "Yes. But I don't think you brought me down here to discuss our daughter. Did I mention how happy I was to see you earlier?" Now that he was here with her, a peace overtook him. And an amusement. She wanted to discuss their parenting duties when she was all tied up and ready for play? No. They did have things to discuss, but it wouldn't be Vi, and it wouldn't be polite. It would be dirty and sweet. Her lips turned down in the most delicious pout. "I got the idea that you weren't happy to see me." Oh, I was happy. He walked over to the small table someone had kindly set up for him. At least now he knew where Ariel had disappeared to after dinner. She and Nina seemed to have set up an array of treats for their friend. I was also surprised. You were supposed to be in New York. I didn't want to be in New York. When he'd suggested she should go to be with their daughter, and she'd agreed, he'd been disappointed. It was perverse, but he'd wanted an argument out of her. You didn't tell me that. You didn't want to hear it. Fair, he agreed. But not because I didn't want you, baby. I was hurt, and I didn't talk to you about it. I was scared because you mean everything to me. Getting my memory back, getting my life back, means nothing if you're not in it. I'm sorry I doubted you. It all happened so fast, she began. He shook his head. He didn't need to have some big fight with her. He'd thought he did. But all he'd truly needed was to give up his own insecurities. Of course she'd worried. He would have worried too. No apologies. It did happen fast, and we were both caught in it. Here's the thing. I love you. Do you love me? Her eyes were steady on his, emotion shining in them. So much. I loved you as Stephen. I loved you as Tucker. I'll love you as Timothy Seeger. He picked up the deerskin flogger. The falls were buttery soft and perfect to warm her up a bit. But then he wouldn't be touching her. He wanted his hands on her skin. Toys might have to wait. Then a little jar caught his eye, and he thanked the universe his sister-in-law understood how fun torture could be. He didn't need a damn thing to get warmed up. He was already hot for her. He could fuck her hard right that second. However, she'd set this scene up, and he wasn't about to fail her. But he had made a few decisions. I think I like Tucker. I consider it a nickname, and I earned it. I like the way you say my name. Tucker. A smile settled on her face. I love you, Tucker. The words were a balm to his soul. I love you, Ronnie. I'm sorry I hesitated back in Paris. Like I said, I was scared. You were worried I would change my mind. I won't. And I won't either. He pulled his t-shirt over his head and tossed it aside before picking up the jar they'd left for him. Well, for him to use on her. I think, though, that you forgot something. What's that? I'm in charge in this room. He moved to the bedside and opened the jar, getting a dab of the cream on his fingers. Spread your legs. Her eyes widened, and he was pleased with the bit of trepidation he saw there. What is that? She asked, the question a breathy huff. It wouldn't do for her to be completely comfortable. The main ingredient is menthol. Can you guess what it does, and how I'm planning on using it? Her nipples had tightened. You're going to put it on my clitoris. It's going to stimulate the nerves there. Make it easier for me to orgasm. He loved the fact that she could barely get the words out. Precisely. Now do as I asked, and spread your legs. Her knees came apart, giving him access to what he wanted. Her pussy was lovely and soft. His cock thickened further at the sight of that sweet part of herself. He palmed her, easing his hands across the soft, smooth skin of her pussy. He slid his fingers between her labia, loving how wet she already was. What have you been lying here thinking about? Her eyes closed as she obviously reveled in the contact. Mostly about the fact that Nina was sitting here talking about her favorite books, and how weird it was that I was naked and she wasn't. You took your time. That hadn't been all she'd thought about. Either that,
or he'd had a quick effect on her. He rubbed the cream on her clitoris, taking his time and watching how she responded, how her breath deepened, her toes curling as he worked the cream all over her clit. Her hips moved, pressing herself up against his fingers. He set the jar down, because a little of that stuff went a long way, and he wasn't ready for her to come yet. Not until he'd had a bit of fun. He reached over and undid the tie on her right hand. I want you on all fours. I think you earned a spanking.
Earned? How?
He could come up with a million ways she'd scared the hell out of him, but one was enough. Well, let's see. You got yourself kidnapped. Her eyes flared.
I did not get myself kidnapped.
Play with me. I spent hours and hours worried you were dead. I should get to spank that pretty ass. She wasn't used to the lifestyle, so he had to coax her. He knew if she tried, she would enjoy it. Her eyes went gorgeously wide and innocent.
I was terrible. I got myself kidnapped and worried my poor husband.
He felt a brilliant smile cross his face as he released her other hand. I like the sound of that.
See how I worked that in?
She replied with a grin, and then she gasped.
Oh, that stuff works fast.
She turned over, and suddenly that pretty ass was in the air, waiting for his caress. She was all his. This was what he'd wanted as he'd walked through the streets of Paris that day. He'd wanted a life where she was waiting for him, where she trusted and loved him. They had a shot at it now. You are so beautiful. He ran his hand over her back, tracing the graceful line of her spine from her neck all the way down to her ass. He cupped a cheek before bringing his hand up and back in a sharp arc. Her whole body shuddered. Do you have any idea how scared I was I would lose you? He spanked her again. Easy slaps to her flesh meant more to sensitize than to punish. He didn't want to punish her. He simply wanted this connection with her. And he had been scared. Terrified. He'd come close to getting what he'd wanted once before, and that bastard Dwyer had almost taken everything from him again. Did he hurt you? The question was accompanied by another smack.
He hit me with a gun. He properly surmised that the minute I thought Nina was safe, I would scream my head off. That's why he knocked me out with the gun, she admitted. After I woke up in the trunk of his car, he dosed me. The sedative was surprisingly easy. Good rest, no nausea afterward. I think Kronberg has a winner there.
This smack was harder because he didn't need her sarcasm. Except he did. It brought a smile to his face. I wouldn't go buying stock. I think that company is going to undergo some big changes soon. They would burn to the ground if he had any say in things.
Okay, but that was seriously good stuff,
she replied, giving him a wiggle of that gorgeous ass. He spanked her again, loving the way her skin pinkened. He set in on his task, smacking her cheeks over and over again. He watched her carefully, studied how she responded. Every smack and caress made his cock ache. Never again, he swore. You are not allowed to be kidnapped again. I'm not going to be shot at again or mind erased. We're going to find someplace nice and quiet and raise our kids, and life is going to be boring. And he would love every second of it. He would love every boring, normal, not getting shot at or under threat of arrest moment.
I promise. God, I promise, Tucker. I'll promise you anything if you'll please fuck me. I'm dying, and I like the spanking thing, but it's got to stop because I'm dying here.
He slapped her backside one last time, and then lifted her with ease. It was time to please his woman.
She could medically explain what that damn cream had done to her clitoris, but academic words couldn't possibly express what she felt. Fire, want, desperate need. It had taken the normal desire she had for him and turned the dial up to 100, but then it fit. She'd already been at the extremes of need on an emotional level. Since the moment she'd decided to make her play for him, she'd been a bundle of nerves, knowing this might be their last shot. Nina had brought Ariel into their plot. It had been Ariel who convinced her to show Tucker how much she trusted him. Naturally, Ariel's way had been to tie her up naked and make her wait until Tucker came down and found her, and all of his doubts magically drifted away at the sight of her naked boobs. Nina had sat in the room, chatting as though it wasn't abnormal at all to hang out with a naked chick. She'd only left when Ariel had texted her Tucker was on his way down. Tucker lifted her and rolled her over, moving her onto her back. There was soft material under her, caressing her slightly sore backside. That spanking had been a revelation. The minor pain had been overwhelmed by the sensitivity she'd received. It was like every slap of his hand went straight to her pussy. Even now, she could feel how warm her skin was. The thought that she might feel it the next day made her perfectly happy. She watched as his hands went to his waistband, shoving down his jeans and showing off that body she craved. He was a stunning man, even more so than he'd been years before. She let go of all the time that he'd been gone. They'd been taken from her, but she wouldn't let those lost years cost them their future. Not that she was thinking of the future. Nope. She wanted the right now. He climbed on the bed, but didn't fall on top of her, and that was annoying. She started to reach for him, but that was the moment he pounced. He pinned her hands above her head and pressed her into the mattress with his body. Even the feel of his skin against hers was almost enough to make her shout out in pleasure. God, I missed this, she managed to breathe. He lowered his head to hers. I missed you. He took her mouth in a long, luscious kiss that had their tongues tangling. After a moment, he released her wrists, and she let her arms wind around him. Everywhere he touched her, she was warm, her skin tingling like it had been asleep without his to press against. Did I say thank you for saving my brother? He whispered the question against her ear as his hands smoothed back her hair. He leaned over and dropped light kisses on her nose. Her hips moved restlessly, trying to make harder contact with him. She was so hot, desperate to have him. That's wonderful. You should reward me. His lips curled in the sexiest smirk. I should. I'll reward you with kisses. Lots of kisses. His mouth covered hers again, and she moaned. It wasn't enough, but she couldn't force him to move faster. Every kiss drugged her with pleasure, with connection. He held her still, forcing her to focus on him. She let her legs tangle with his, moving against his muscular ones. Do you know what else I should reward you for? He kissed his way over her cheek and to her ear where he licked the shell. I should reward you for everything you had to do for our daughter while I was gone. For being the best mom. You should reward me with your cock. It would be the perfect way to celebrate motherhood, doing the very thing that had caused it in the first place. I'll get to that. His hips were moving, gently rocking against her, making her light up. I have to find a condom first. I think your friends forgot them. They weren't on the table. But I did spy a pretty butt plug. She would have to thank Nina and Ariel for that. She intended to avoid the butt plug for the evening. It would have to wait. They didn't put condoms out, because I told them we didn't need them. I think Violet would make a great big sister. And you owe me. He stopped, his whole body going still. His blue eyes were wide as he stared down at her. "What are you saying?" Oh, she had him now. She could see it plainly. He'd likely had plans to keep her on the edge as long as he could, but she was going to make that impossible for him. She was going to make him totally lose control. "I'm saying I want you with me this time. I'm saying you're going to rub my feet and get me Chinese takeout when I can't go another minute without cashew chicken." He smiled, an expression of pure joy. "I will. I'll have to have it brought in from somewhere else, because Jennings only has 2 restaurants and they're both burger joints. But I'll make it work." There had been something wrong about what he'd just said, but he'd moved down her body and taken a nipple in his mouth. Sparks seemed to shoot through her, and she lost her train of thought. He licked and sucked her nipples, moving from one to the other. She let her hands roam across the smooth skin of his shoulders and back, reveling in the muscles she found there. "I'll give you everything you need this time. I won't miss a minute," he vowed, as he nestled beside her and his hand skimmed down from her breasts to the apex of her thighs. "I love you so much. You won't regret it." She never would. Even during the dark times, she hadn't been able to regret being with this man because he'd given her Vi. The minute his finger slid over her clitoris, she could barely breathe. "I need you to give me one because I'm already close. I lose all control when I'm with you. Maybe after we do this a couple of 100 times, I'll be able to make it last," he whispered. "You drive me crazy in the best way possible." He'd told her to give, but he was the one giving. His fingers pressed and rotated, igniting a spark she couldn't deny. Sensation swamped her, and every inch of her flesh seemed lit from within as the orgasm took her. Then he was moving, turning over and offering himself up. Even through the haze of her pleasure, she could see he was in the same position she'd been in when he'd entered the room, on his back, giving himself to her the way she had. "I want to watch you," he said. "I want to watch us." He wanted to watch as she sank onto his cock. She could make that happen. Every limb felt loose, but she straddled him. She gripped him, stroking that big dick of his, and watching as he gritted his teeth and his eyes threatened to roll to the back of his head. "Ronnie, please." Everything about him pleased her, but she knew what he wanted. She lined his cock up and let herself sink on. He filled her up, every inch a new decadent sensation to be had. She lowered herself onto his dick, going slow and watching his every move. His hands came to clutch at her hips, but she wouldn't hurry this. He was a gorgeous sight, his stark blue eyes watching her body. Nothing in the world had ever made her feel as powerful as when Tucker looked at her like that, like she was a goddess, like he needed her more than air or water or food. She began to move, lifting her body up and letting it slide back down. Over and over she impaled herself on his cock. "That's what I want," Tucker groaned, and his hands tightened around her. He moved against her. He never took his eyes off her, his gaze shifting between watching her face, moving to her breasts, and then down to the place where he could watch her take his cock. She tightened around him, feeling the orgasm about to take over again. It sent a shudder through her, and then she felt Tucker's body go taut beneath her, felt him shake as he came deep inside her. Peace overwhelmed her as she let herself fall forward against his chest, listening to the thundering beat of his heart. His hands wound around her, holding her tight. "Oh, we're going to have to practice that a lot. I mean a lot, baby. Maybe I don't always have to be in control. You seem to take the reins nicely." She was so happy. I can do that. Especially if we move back to your hometown. It sounds like we won't be going out. She rolled to the side and sat up, her heart thumping for a different reason. Jennings. You called it Jennings. He smiled and reached up to cup her cheek. I know. I remember where it is. I remember that it's beautiful when the snow falls. I remember we used to keep horses. I remember what our cabin looked like and how good it was to be warm and safe inside it. When did you remember? Shouldn't he have led with that information? Have you called her? I didn't remember until you called me your husband, and I thought about how we could get married in the mountains, he said quietly. I saw you standing there on our big front porch, you and Vi, dressed for a wedding. Our wedding. My mother's name is Sharon Seeger, and she will be waiting. She won't have moved. She won't have given up. In that cabin in the woods where I grew up, she's going to bed tonight and she'll pray that I come home. She'll do it every day, until she gets her sons back. Her tears began at the thought of her future mother-in-law waiting for her babies. She'd been apart from Vi for a few days, and it had seemed like forever. We should call her. He tugged her back down. We will. We'll go upstairs and get my brother, and we'll call Mom. You know why I really remembered? She looked down at him, at this man she was going to spend the rest of her life with. You remember best when you're in the place, so no, I don't. He held her tight. I was thinking that you're my home. I was settled and happy, and I realized no matter what, I'm home with you. And that's when I remembered. She laid her head on his chest and held him, her whole soul complete. Chapter 19. Jennings, Wyoming. 4 days later. Stop. I want to look at it for a minute, Robert said, his voice going hushed. I remember this. Tucker parked the car at the beginning of a long gravel road that led to the house he and his brother had grown up in. It was the road that would lead them home. But then they'd been on it for a long time when he thought about it. Ever since that day when he'd realized his brother was alive, he'd been driving them right back here. It's beautiful, Ariel said. She was seated behind her husband, leaning forward, her hands on his shoulders as she looked out the window at the sea of trees around them. In the distance, snow-capped mountains marked the horizon. Those mountains always had snow on the top, even in the middle of summer. It is. Ronnie sat behind him, Vi in a car seat between her mom and her Aunt Ari. This is where the bus would drop us off, he said to his brother. Robert was remembering more and more, but Tucker's memories of this place had practically flattened him the minute he'd heard his mother's voice over the phone. So much of his life had rushed in, overwhelming him with precious memories. The smell of her banana bread, the way she kissed his boo-boos before putting a bandage on them, the way she'd leaned over and kissed his chest, right over his heart, when his first girlfriend had broken up with him because she'd said a broken heart was far worse than a skinned knee. The way she'd loved them. It had come back in a wave of emotion that had left him shaking and happy. Ronnie had sat up all night listening to stories about his childhood, about his mother and grandfather, and how he and his brother had run wild through the Wyoming wilderness. Up ahead, they could make out the big log cabin they'd called home. Rob unhooked his seatbelt and got out of the SUV they'd rented in Laramie. He stepped out and looked around, taking in his home once again. It was 30 minutes into town, but longer in the winter. God, this place is beautiful in the winter. Rob might remember some things, but he was selectively forgetting a few. He eased out of the vehicle and moved to stand by his brother, looking out over the long drive that led from the road to the big cabin their grandfather had built with his own hands back in the 50s. It was cold, Rob. So freaking cold. We complained bitterly during our high school years. Rob's face lit up. I didn't. You were the whiny one. I was built for the cold. And Mom would stand out here with us. She would have a thermos of hot chocolate to keep us warm. God, we're about to see our Mom. He put a hand on his brother's shoulder. We are. Hey, why don't you two walk down there and Ronnie and I will follow you? Ariel suggested. Ronnie had gotten out of the SUV and leaned against the side. Vi's asleep anyway. And you said the walk after school from the road to the house was a special time for you two. You're home. Take that walk with your brother. He strode to her, closing the space between them. That space meant nothing, since she was always in his heart, no matter where she was. Give us a couple of minutes, and then join us. It's not that... She went on her toes and kissed him. No explanations are necessary. That woman has waited a long time. She deserves a couple of moments with her boys. You should enjoy the attention, because once she gets a look at her grandbaby, it will all be over. She'll fall madly in love with Vi. God, he loved this woman. It had all been worth it, because she was here with him. She will indeed. See you in a few. He handed her the keys as his brother kissed Ariel and joined him at the top of the drive. Granddad didn't want to pave this because he said it would make it easier for people to get to the house. You know, for a small-town doctor, he was a little curmudgeonly. Rob stared straight ahead. It was good his brother was remembering on his own. He was a character. I'm nervous, Rob admitted. The hard dirt and gravel crunched under his feet in a beautifully familiar way. Why? If anything, I should be nervous. I believe I promised her I would have you home soon. It took me a long time. She might make me sit in the corner. Rob snorted, an amused sound. She was a terrible disciplinarian. All we had to do was look sad and she gave in. I loved her. I loved her so much. She was always worried that she wasn't enough after Dad left, but she was. She was everything, and there's nothing to worry about. I'm glad it happened, and I'm going to tell her that. I'm glad because we're here, he admitted. Rob nodded. I'm glad we're here, too. Here meant Ronnie and Vi and Ariel. Here might not have been where they had thought they would end up. Something terrible had happened, but they'd survived. They'd lived and sacrificed and built families. Even though we couldn't remember her, she was with us, Tucker said, emotion welling as the door to the cabin came open and a petite woman with steel-colored hair walked out, her hand to her heart. Rob stopped and stared. Mom. Tears started streaming down his brother's face. Oh, I missed her. I missed her so much. Last one home has to do the dishes. Tucker felt a fierce smile cross his face. It had been their game. It had taken him years to beat his brother, though Rob had always winked and helped him after supper anyway. Because he'd been the best big brother. Tucker took off, jogging to meet the woman who had waited so faithfully for her sons to come home. All the years they'd been gone, she'd hoped and prayed and never given up. Rob fell in beside him, racing toward their mom. And when her arms were around them, when they were finally together, his job, the one he'd begun so many years before, was done.
he was home. London, England. The man who called himself Ezra Fane sat back and wondered how bad this particular meeting was going to go. Because it was definitely going to go bad. He could feel it. There had been something in Levi Green's eyes as they'd hauled him away that day in Paris. He hadn't been upset. There hadn't been worry or even hope in his eyes. There had been something far more frightening stamped on his face. Triumph. "I hear the lads are happy." Damon Knight sat across from him, looking like he fit perfectly well in the efficient conference room. Though it wasn't the one at the garden, Knight still looked like he owned the place. Of course, at one point he'd belonged here, since this was MI6 headquarters. "Yes, I talked to Tucker and Rob last night. They're thrilled to be home. I think Rob will come back to work, but you've probably lost Tucker. He's already talking about finishing up his residency as soon as he can. He and Veronica are both looking to restart their medical careers." Damon nodded at him from across the conference table. "I always knew I would lose some of them. Most of them, really, since Sasha and Dante are gone. Jackson River are already on their way back to Colorado. Owen and Rebecca are spending some time in Scotland, but he's assured me he's coming back. Of course, at some point Rebecca will need to move, and we'll lose him too. Funny, isn't it? When Tag first foisted that crew on me, I couldn't wait to get rid of them. I suppose we all get attached to strays. Makes it hard when they find their homes. I think they'll always come back for a visit. You won't get rid of them so easily. But damn, it's good to see them happy," he admitted, although it left him wondering what the hell he was going to do next. The Lost Boys had found their places in the world, but he was still floating, still completely unanchored. Because she was always the one who grounded you. Or rather, you grounded her, and that was your place in the world. Watching her fly. He shut that voice down, because he wasn't giving in. Being around her so much in the last few months had softened him up. Being around her smile, and all that freaking blonde hair that ended up everywhere, and the way she could look at him like he was a god on earth. Solo really came through, Damon was saying. Once we turned over that data, she got pardons for Tucker and Jax within hours. I have to say I'm impressed with how quickly she worked, especially since she was rather annoyed with you. Annoyed wasn't the word he would use. Kim had felt utterly betrayed by him. His plan to distract her had worked. He'd started a fight. She'd never been able to back down, and he could keep it going forever. Of course, he'd considered distracting her another way. He'd thought about backing her up against the wall and pressing his body to hers. Kim was the single most sensual woman he'd ever met, and she'd always responded to him like he was the only man she wanted to touch her. Unfortunately, he definitely wasn't the only man she'd wanted. Yes, she seems determined to do this right, he replied. And then it would be over. That's what she'd told him. She'd told him he'd finally gone too far when she realized he'd distracted her and let Levi Green escape with Tucker and Rob. The look on her face. He'd thought he was over such silly notions as shame, but he'd felt it in that moment. He glanced toward the doors. Where is everyone else? Damon looked down at his watch. They should be here soon. I was disappointed we were left out of the initial meetings. Have you been out of the game so long you forgot how this works? He'd known damn well the minute the agency got their hands on that thumb drive that they would only see the information the agency wanted them to. We're private citizens. We're lucky they're willing to talk to us at all. Damon frowned, a supremely arrogant look. I don't like being on the outside. I don't like not controlling things.
I know Rupert has been accommodating since that bloody Kronberg employee he brought along went rogue, but I have a bad feeling about this. It was good to know he wasn't the only one. I do too. Something's off about this whole thing. The door came open, and there she was. Kimberly Solomon. Used to be Kent. His one-time wife. The only woman he'd ever loved, and the only one he'd ever hated. Sometimes he thought he clung to the hate with every bit as much vigor as he'd held on to the love. "Hello, Beck." She moved to the seat furthest from him, putting her ridiculously expensive handbag on the table in front of her. "Damon, it's good to see you." "And you, Solo," Damon returned. "I want to say thank you for everything you did for the lads. I suspect you're the only reason we're here today, too. I appreciate it all." She sank into her seat, not looking his way. "I'm glad it worked out. But I've got to admit they've been stonewalling me about the drive. I tried to go back to D.C. to help analyze the data, and I was told to stay here in London to liaise with MI6. I think someone convinced the big bosses that I'm too close to the subject. I have to wonder if that was you, Beck." He shook his head, rather hurt at the suspicion in her eyes. Even when he was horrible to her, when they fought like cats and dogs, she didn't look at him like he was the bad guy. "No. Why would I try to put you on the outside? We kind of need you on the inside. Are you telling me you haven't seen the report?" He didn't like the sound of that. This had been Kim's op. She should have been the one trying to decrypt the data, or at least it should have been her team doing it. Damon seemed to have the same concerns. "Who is running the op now?" She shrugged. "No idea. I suppose it's one of the big guys. I'll find out when they walk through the door." Kim. Whose name is on that list? A chill crept up his spine. There was supposed to be a list of everyone who'd worked with MacDonald. What had Levi said? That he'd been waiting. That he'd been patient. What if this had been Levi's play all along? She blinked as though thinking. "What do you mean?" The doors came open, and his worst fear walked right in wearing a three-piece suit and looking like a complete douchebag. Levi Green was back, and he'd prettied himself up for the occasion. And he'd brought friends. Friends who probably had lots of guns. Fuck. He was caught, and he was about to be arrested because that fucker had stacked the deck. Anger flushed through his system, and he thought seriously about going down in a blaze of glory. This was what Levi had waited for, why he hadn't broken under torture. He'd known this was coming because he'd set it up years ago. He'd set up his worst enemy to take a fall no one would see coming. Somehow, Levi had put his name on that list. He just knew it. Levi smirked as he stood at the head of the table. "Hello, all. It's so good to be back." Kim stood, a look of horror dawning on her face. "What are you doing here? Why have you been released?" "My darling, not only have I been released, I'm back to my full duties, and unfortunately, the first is a bit distasteful," Levi said, his voice silky smooth. He glanced back at the small army he'd brought with him. "Gentlemen, it's time." Ezra stood, ready to fight. "Mr. Knight, I invited you here because someone should be a witness," Levi said as 4 large men walked into the room. "Don't make me regret it. You'll have full access to the data after I do what needs to be done. Arrest him. Take him out of the country and put him at Green's mercy." "Kimberly Solomon, I'm placing you under arrest for treason," Green said, as his men put hands on her. Damon had moved quickly and gripped Ezra's arm, stopping him from what he wanted to do. Tear apart the men who were manhandling his wife. Ex-wife. "Don't," Damon whispered. "You have to let her go. We're outnumbered. There's a reason he's doing it here. He's got the full cooperation of MI6. "What is happening?" Kim tried to pull away, but they held her tight. "Be careful with her," Levi barked. "I told you I'll kill the first person who hurts her. She's an important prisoner. Levi, I swear if you take her, I'm going to kill you," he said, his heart racing. He thought he'd found the worst-case scenario, but Levi had taken it a step further. "I'm sure you'll try," Levi replied, with a calm that unnerved Ezra. "Damon, I wish you hadn't stopped him. I wouldn't mind shooting him right here. Solo, your name was on the list. We know you were working with MacDonald. What a pity." Kim had gone completely white. "That's not true. You're lying." Damon's hand tightened as they began to haul her out. "There's nothing you can do now. Patience. We'll get her back if we need to. I promise, brother. Don't make things worse right now." It was the word brother that did it, that calmed him and made him believe every word Damon was saying. Kim looked to him. He waited for her to plead with him to save her, but then her shoulders straightened and her chin came up. She didn't believe he would fight for her, because he'd given her no reason to think he would. She walked out, the betrayed queen on her way to the execution, her head held high, her whole demeanor defiant, even as she complied. His queen. He watched as Green turned and walked after her, but not before he'd winked his way. "I'm going to kill that man," he vowed. "I'm going to help you," Damon promised. He was left shaken. Now that she was gone, he knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that he couldn't let her go.